All right, I think we're all set. Okay. We are... Yep, I think we're live. Okay. Oh, what the... Wait, what the hell is happening here? All right. Hello? Hello? There we go. Woo! There we go. Let's, for the sake of our background audio, let's bring this up. Graphics, general. All right, let's... There we go. I think... Okay, there we go. That seems good. There we are. All right, so... Haven't been doing this one in a while. It's gonna be a fun little excursion. Now, let's see. Let's see if we can have a... Oh, let me send a message real quick to good old Acer. See if he wants to come in. Let me see about that. There we go. Let me just send that. There we go. If you want. Start the call. There we go. All right, there we go. Set that all up. Wait, wrong controller. Damn it. Oh, going crazy. Yeah, yeah, okay, he's setting up good. Okay, so we're gonna be doing something a little different today, which is that I'm going to have a little buddy while I do these inane little tasks for myself. Also, just to make sure. Oh god, I forgot how long he says he'll ping me when he's ready, so that's good. But oh my lord. Lordy lord. Oh god almighty. That feels rough. Looks like it's fine though. I forgot how long the pause is. It's like trying to figure all this out. I wish there's a mod that could fix this, but I think it's just too deep into the game structure, like how it's made. I don't think there's an easy way to be able to solve this when you make a big base like I do. It's just funny how absolutely enormous it gets though over time. All right, let's keep going. Anyway, as I was trying to say before, I've been working on Bloodstains and stuff like that. It's one of those things with Bloodborne where it's very weird, where I don't have the problem with getting all the information. It's on how to organize it for you guys, so that way it's like all like digestible in the bite-sized topics. And this one is very uniquely difficult because it's like, okay, I have to figure out what information do I want to talk about as like a general primer on just the Bloodsaints and their history, and then try to then weave in the individual talks. I'll be talking about obviously Adeline and Adela. But I also want to talk about Amelia, because I do think that she probably was herself a Bloodsaint. And I want to talk about her at the end, right? That feels like the most appropriate thing. Like you talk about the more firmer ones, right? And I think that one's the one that I'm actually having the easiest thing with, because it's like, okay, I know how I can end this all. But it's the other two in the middle that's becoming a bit of a struggle. Oh, and looks like he's ready. So let's bring him on. Let's bring our boy on.
Hey!
Yeah, there we go. Let me just make sure that he talk again.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're definitely,
Yeah.
you're hearable. Okay, so guys, if there's anything like where the background audio's too quiet or something now over us, like feel free to tell me. But until then, I will assume that everything is fine. All right, so great having you on here. I love to just kind of do a little unique little chat type of thing here, so that way people have more to listen to while I'm running around doing this kind of base building stuff, especially with the game pausing. I hate it when games are designed like this, but I love this game too much. Building giant bases and they just freeze.
This is Subnautica.
Yeah.
I feel like I knew deep things about Subnautica way back in the day when this was a fairly new game, but it might have been another underwater sort of sandbox kind of game.
I'll be honest, I'd be surprised if there's another underwater sandbox kind of game, because I have never heard of one, at least not with like, 3D. I'm sure there's like 2D versions or something. I'm not really plugged into the 2D space, but I feel like I would have heard if there was another like open, it's not really, I guess it's open world technically, but like if there was another like kind of like survival sim underwater thing. I feel like there's a lot of like island type things, like you build a bunch of like rafts or something.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of those. Workus did Ocean Work. It's a sort of PlayStation 1 style survival game.
Ooh, so like kind of got like that little like retro aesthetic for it.
Yeah, I remember playing that. Maybe I'm confusing. No, I'm not confusing it for that. I feel like so Subnautica is that's like 10 years old plus, right?
At this point, it's getting up there for sure. I don't know if it's exactly 10 years or not yet. I mean, it's one of those games where I feel like it's a one-hit wonder. Like the devs made a really good first game, then they tried doing the spin-off with Below Zero, and it just did not work out. It should have been a Subnautica 2 project. I think they were trying to just make it like a DLC like expansion type thing, but then it got like feature creep, and they ended up trying to expand, and then became like its own spin-off thing or whatever, and they completely redid the story, I think like twice or something like that, and it ended up not being good anyway. So, and now there's all the drama over the new one. I forget what the exact details are. Something like the publisher or whoever is like, screwing over the devs or something. Typical corporate crap. So I have no idea what's really going on with it at this point. But it's just one of those things where I'm like, I feel like even by the time it comes out, I'm not sure if it'll even be good. So
I feel like, Minecraft, there's a bunch of these sorts of exploration, build your stuff kind of games that came out. I feel like this era ended too quick because you had stuff like Minecraft and Terraria, and I feel like they sort of they birthed two things at the same time. They birthed, we're going to put crafting in our game, and it was kind of like just half-baked crafting systems that went nowhere. And then they birthed these just sort of hardcore, this is just a survival game, the Alone in the Dark, those sorts of games where, oh no, not Alone in the Dark. Shoot, I forget its name. You're like in some Alaskan winter, and you have to make it from one end of the map to another, and you get like cold and hypothermia. Like they birthed that, and like those.
Wait, is that what's it called? Is it one of those RTS type games?
No. It's a first person.
No, yeah, because I'm thinking of another title then. But like, yeah, there's one like that where it's like all of like London or whatever. Like, there's a second Ice Age, and now everyone's got to try to survive or what have you.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called.
That War of Mine, is it that one?
No,
I don't know if that one has an Ice Age.
No, I have it. I think I have it in my Steam library. Let me double check real quick. Where the hell is it? Steam library? Oh, it's on my other screen. Okay. It is RTS. I'm pretty sure I have it under. Yeah, Frostpunk. That's the one.
Frostpunk. I've heard about that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this era, like, I feel like it ended too quick because the meta of the sort of survival branch of video games just became tuned around making content for Twitch streamers so that they can stream it and the game can probably hopefully sell.
Right.
And I feel like it sort of limited the form. And I think that there is a really good survival game yet to come out. I think they have so much more in them than has been fully tapped.
Well, how do you think the streamers are perverting it exactly? Like, is it just that they add features that the general player base wouldn't care about, but a streamer uniquely would be interested in, or?
Well, so I would say partly it's get them done quick, get them done cheap, so that, because a streamer is not going to play the game that long, like maybe a week. So there's just sort of like a mass
it kind of feeds into the early access problem, right?
Yeah, but like there's another. So this is horror games, because if you remember when Let's Plays really began, it was, people did like Call of Duty, Machinimas and such, but like PewDiePie and playing Amnesia: The Dark Descent, like a lot of Let's Players got really big playing horror games.
Right.
And what happened at the time was like every time they went viral, it was like, oh, here he is being startled and screaming.
Right.
And so games moved from things like Penumbra and Amnesia towards Outlast. And every single startling moment in Outlast, well, not everyone, but a lot of them, commit the cardinal sin of happening in scripted cutscenes where you don't control your character anymore. And it's like,
I have that
for a
problem
stream,
I have problem
for
with
a
Outlast
streamer,
overall
for
for just
people.
being like, what's the word? What's the word? Just being like Outlast is the problem where it's just like a shock value type game where it does everything for the sake of trying to get that reaction out of you without having like anything really meaningful to it otherwise. It's such a I don't usually use this term, but it's just kind of vulgar. I think that especially became obvious with Outlast 2, where it really tried to push it, right? Like, it's one of those things where, like, it's got to somehow hit a new high. But as you were saying.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, we have anti-Christian imagery, just like every other horror media, and we don't do anything with it. It's like, and then you have the Outlast trials, and it's just, it's just kind of wound up into nonsense. I think there is some depth in the first one, which, I think there is potential in that license, especially in the first game, if they had
the first game was definitely
really
the best,
refined it.
Yeah, there's a lot of good, I think, in the first game. I think the problem with the first game is that it's just built on that very rocky foundation of we're going to be the shock horror type thing, right? Like, it's kind of like, it's not even like, oh, we're going for like slasher horror or something, right? Where you're at least trying to get like that very specific where, oh, it's like this big, gross, disgusting like guy or something like that. They kind of have that with like the big fat warden dude who will chase you, but like he's not really in it a lot. And they just try to kind of like throw like a bunch of different types of shocking, disgusting, gross things at you throughout the first game.
Yeah, it's a lot of that.
Right? And it's like, okay, like you're building around it, but like the substance connecting it just isn't as good. But the idea of, oh, I'm going to this asylum, it's getting weird, it's creepy, there's like government experiment type crap, that type of thing, like it has potential, like you said, but I feel like it's just one of those things where like it just didn't realize it properly.
And if you compare it to like even Slender, I don't like Slender. I never really liked Slender, but Slender was popular when Amnesia was popular. Amnesia has a lot of artistry and craft. Slender is very cheap, it always was. But those games,
I think what Slender had that Amnesia doesn't was that it had the idea that there was this one foe that was chasing you around and like stalking you, and that became something very interesting because you could have a very simple AI, but it feels like it's more complicated because there's so much unknowns to it. Kind of like Amnesia with its sanity mechanic. Like, once you know the sanity mechanic, you're like, oh, this thing doesn't really do anything. But when you don't know, when we were living in an era where without guides, you don't really know much about games. You didn't have data mining like channels like we do now. Like, suddenly, like, everything becomes really mysterious and weird. You don't exactly know how it works or whatever, but it does this, does that. Like, that's, I think, the era why Slender would succeed. I think nowadays, I think Slender wouldn't
also
have
it was free.
Well, yeah, but
it was free, and like
12-year-olds
could play it.
But there was a bunch of different iterations of it too. I'm not sure if all of those were free or not. But the point is like ultimately you're making a game where I think that you could thrive on the unknown, especially when you're a horror title. Whereas I think nowadays, like, you would be able to crack that right away. You'd have a billion videos posted. A lot of people, if they do play the game, they're not going to have that same level of mystique to it, I think.
Yeah. And also, so if you look at the sort of Let's Play of Amnesia, all of the spooks and scares are really driven by genuine sort of, and like scripted encounters, but still like encounters in the gameplay. Whereas for Outlast, it's always like no longer controlling the camera and no longer controlling my guy. And like a hand comes out and tries to grab you.
Right.
And like, it's like, I think like the Let's Play scene kind of corrupted the small or like the AA horror games because they sort of became optimized for the viewer and not the player.
Right.
And in that same way, I think that survival games, they optimized for the viewer.
Right.
Because survival games, to me, I think the hidden depth of this genre is that you could, in a survival game, reasonably ask the player to just sit at a campfire for an hour and just sort of overhauling their inventory, like really, really deep survival mechanics.
Right.
But that's not fun to watch.
Kind of like the
you have
old
to be
thing
constantly
you can do
moving.
with what's it called? Not Outlast. Like with old survival with like Bethesda, like oh, I got a survival mode type styles you would have on some RPGs and things like that, where you had to drink, you had to do maintenance or whatever. I feel like that's one of the problems Dark Souls has. It didn't really know what it wanted to do with its repair system, so it ended up being like, just cut it. What's it matter?
Yeah. It's like item weight in Demon Souls. Like, if you actually double down on this can actually matter. But if you double down on it, it kind of changes the sort of game you're making. So what do you want to do? And it's like,
Yeah,
well, we'll
I
just
thought
remove
that
it.
being able to put stuff straight into your box from in the field was one of the worst changes that the remake made on the mechanic side. Because I'm just like you don't
Yeah.
need to do this. Like all you need to do, all the players need to do is get into the habit of just when you return back to your base, making sure that they like dump everything they have that they don't want there. In fact, I would prefer if you had a mechanic where you could mark things, so it's like, oh, certain types of items that you're more likely to want to put away and then like, you know, bring out later, you can do, and then you can like unmark them if you want to keep them in your inventory or something, right? Like there were plenty of ways to do it. I think the way they did it was just kind of like, you know, it kind of just took away from like what made Demon Souls like kind of unique or what it was going for. And like when I tried to like recreate the authentic experience, I'm like, this really isn't bad. You didn't need to add this mechanic. It's not like, oh my god.
I would have been okay. So a change that I would welcome in Demon Souls would be if you are over encumbered, or you're like picking this item up would make you over encumbered, you still pick it up and then you drop it right away. So now it no longer exists in the world outside of that sort of temporal item drop. And if you leave and come back, it won't be there anymore.
Oh, so
I would like them
it's
to.
Actually, I didn't know. Is it actually there if you come back later, or?
No. It despawns because
Oh,
you
okay.
do pick it up, and then you drop it immediately again. It just like changes.
Right.
What I would want is that the original sort of yellow light, white light indicator of you can interact with this. I would want interacting with that to first check, can I pick this up? And if no, then I don't pick it up. And then you can come back later and loot it if
So you
you're
want
over
something where
encumbered.
it's something where it's like you can keep it in the world, and so you don't potentially lose like a unique item or something.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
I can
especially
understand
because
that.
like on a first playthrough you don't know what you're picking up. Like maybe this is valuable, so now I have to drop other stuff to check it out, and then I have to cycle through my stuff.
Yeah.
It's like,
I get you. I get what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I would also be interested to see if they could just do one of these games where like, hey, you know, if you drop the claymore at any point and it despawns, then we're just gonna flip the variable that says that this is now purchasable by any vendor, or if it's a special item, you can recover it like in a relevant location. So like in Elden Ring, if you drop the moonlight, you can go to Manus Elise and it will always be there on the altar.
right.
Or whereas if it's like, oh, this is like the Zweihander, and it just unlocks as a purchasable the moment you loot it everywhere. So that if you drop it,
or have a specialized chest where like it will always go to like it'll be like a random chest in the world you have to discover, but like any item that you've dropped and you never picked up, or you died before you or whatever, right? Like that will always be there in that chest as like a spawn, and you can always go there to pick it up, but it's like a secret location, so you have to discover it first. So it's not like free.
like a hidden chest in every region, and like the dropped stuff
didn't
just
Dark
goes
Souls
there.
1 have a chest like that where it was like for really niche cases, but it was a chest that would actually be filled with like items or something? And
Yeah, for like it was for I think mandatory progression items.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, you could have something like that, but instead of it being for mandatory stuff, which I get why they set it up where they do, like just have it being like, you know, make it like, I don't know, somewhere in the Great Hollow, there is, I don't know, the special secret shrine to the dragons, and like if you go to the shrine to the dragons, there'll be items there that you dropped or whatever, and you can like pick like that. At the very least, you're like, oh, okay, so this thing wasn't lost forever, it was just like an opportunity thing, because I think opportunity cost losses are fine.
Have it in the Valley of Defilement with all the other discarded and unwanted things of the world.
Yeah, and Demon Souls, yeah, like something like that, right? Like there's definitely ways to do it. But that actually gets me onto my topic. So, what are your feelings about storytelling as by From Software as of Elden Ring? Because I've always been like, you know, obviously I'm kind of a lore guy, right? So I've always been someone who's always like, you know, I kind of always taken great pride in how From Software you know, sort of tells their story in a way that really you can only do in the video game medium. I find that something that is infinitely valuable to video games as an art form, to able to kind of tell stories that aren't just like, oh, this may as well just be a movie, or this may as well just be a novel or something like that, right? So I do kind of enjoy that a lot. But what do you feel about like how, because I know you've talked about this before in some of your other critique videos, is how From Software seems to have kind of pretty much stuck with like kind of the same methodology. You have your environmental storytelling, right? You have your dialogue, right? You know, typical that you would see in like, you know, basically any video game, right? And then you have like the little item descriptions there giving you kind of these non-diegetic snippets of lore. Sometimes it's something maybe you already know, maybe something it's not, and they use sort of a selective tell, not tell, in order for them to be able to kind of like you be able to kind of piece things together and fill in the necessary gaps for wherever there is like, oh my god, you know, I see you know, a woman standing over like horrified as a man with a bloody knife stands over a corpse, and then I find a locket, and the locket tells me how the woman had a terrible secret when her husband was left, and then you're like, oh, okay, so the husband came home, saw the woman, his wife, cheating on with like, I don't know, a younger man or something, then he in a blind rage killed her, right? Like, you know, stuff like that where you can like fill in the gaps using what is essentially, you know, just kind of suggestions and innuendo, right? And that's basically been consistent with From Software storytelling throughout all the games. I think the only major difference is usually in sequels, they're more willing to kind of just say, oh yeah, this is what was happening in the last game, we'll be more explicit about this because now we have new stuff to be suggestive about in the sequel, right? That's pretty much, but outside of the Dark Souls series, they haven't really done something like that. So I was kind of curious, where do you think they go from here? Do you think they've pretty much like kind of perfected what they're doing right now and they should just stick with it? Do you think there's more they can or should do with it or something? Like what are your thoughts on that?
So I remember when Elden Ring came out,
right.
I made my video and I concluded by saying, look, I think this game is a masterpiece, but I know for a fact every single person calling it a masterpiece today is going to, like a year from now, you're all going to say, well, what about this flaw? And what about this flaw? Because when you have that sort of virgin effect, when you're playing it for the first time, you're so blown away by it. But the moment you start replaying it and you start reevaluating it, you start noticing like the cracks in the perfect statues.
Yeah, for sure. Like, there's definitely moments where I'm like, wow, I'm so impressed with Elden Ring and how like put together and stuff. Like, I'm so used to some of the stuff like in Bloodborne or whatever, where, like you turn a corner or something, you kind of see like, oh, you know, there's a little thing where they forgot to cover up that seam or something like that, right? But even as I've played it over and over, I'm finally starting to be like, you know, that's a little flaw or imperfection there. Like they could have like, you know, covered that up better or whatever, right? But I will admit, it took a really long time for me to find those types of things, and they're still very few and far between compared to some of their past games. So I still think it's very impressive, you know, just...
Oh, totally. But what I was going to say is that I felt that Shadow of the Erdtree vindicated every single experiment they did in Elden Ring base game. I think the open world makes a hell of a lot more sense in Shadow of the Erdtree. I know people are like mixed on the Shadow Tree fragments. I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see them explore that just as their new way of leveling up. It's just, yeah, you complete an area or you just find these hidden level up fragments rather than do run backs. Like, hey, what would these games look like if you couldn't rely on run back to drive engagement anymore?
Oh, what do you mean by what do you mean by run backs? Because we already got rid of run backs in the base game with the Stakes America, so...
yeah, but I mean like in the gauntlets.
Like
so like instead of your levels being you collect souls and then you upgrade your levels, it would just be the way it operates in Shadow of the Erdtree, where all that matters is finding
general, like, you know, level progression and stuff like that. You're not going through to find new items necessarily and get new equipment or level ups and things like that. You're saying, oh, now it's searching for this item which will give me an advantage. Yeah, I'm a bit more critical of the system, but I am open to hearing.
Totally fair.
I'm open to hearing, like, you know. Like, I see what you're saying. Like, it's something where it's like, okay, well, I can definitely see, like, you know, if you iterate on this, you can make it, like, perfect. I personally feel like the system as is, it's kind of just frustrating, but I will admit, I'm one of those people who was like, I was going against Rolana, and I was, like, beating my head against the wall, being like, damn, I just feel like this is too much. And then, like, I come back later with stuff, and then suddenly she's, like, piss easy because I got a few more fragments now. So it's, like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I like the idea of having, like, a parallel leveling system for just your DLC. Like, I get what the intention would be, right? But I feel like, why didn't you just kind of scale it as part of like end game progression like you've done in the past? Like, I've never really, like, has there ever been a time where like someone's done DLC and they're like, oh no, I'm not able to handle this this DLC boss or anything because I'm so under leveled for it compared to where I was in the base game? Like, generally I feel like everyone's usually, they only tackle the DLCs when they're already at those levels anyway, and if they don't, they quickly find out because they'll get raffle stomped by like the first basic enemy they fight or something.
Yeah. And I mean, like you have to go to the frigid outskirts to even get to the DLC. So you're already so deep into the end game by that point.
Frigid
But what I was going to
Frigid
say,
Outskirts, this isn't DS2, it's DS2
no,
too. No, you gotta go to Mogwai Palace.
the
is what I'm saying.
consecrated, the consecrated snowfields. But like yeah, you have to beat Lindell and you have to make it over
Oh,
the
yeah,
bridge.
Like, yeah, getting to Mogwai Palace is like, it's not something that just anyone can do for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But what I was saying was that like every experiment and every change to the game that Shadow of the Erdtree brought, I think was like, yes, okay, you did Elden Ring, and you clearly knew what you needed to do differently. You clearly had a good sense of like best practices for level design and for storytelling in these open world games. Now you clearly internalized all of the correct lessons from me. And one of them was storytelling, because I think Shadow of the Erdtree has a much more compelling story than the base game.
Oh,
Base game story is, oh yeah. I think the idea.
You are. That's. I don't know about the larger community, but I can at least speak that in my corners and circles, like it's that's like a bad word you just said there. That's just like really.
So to me, so if you look at the best moments of storytelling in base game Elden Ring,
Okay.
I would say it's Radahn's death, and you see the meteors dropping. I would say it's the lift of Tectis, because now, like, whenever you make an actual change in the world, I think those moments hit the hardest. And
So
I
like,
think
you're
the
saying
entire
when like, Melena's at the forge or whatever, and she's doing the Destined Death thing.
yeah, well,
Because
Yeah, when-
that's a scene I particularly would say I feel nothing, but I feel it's because I feel nothing for Melina.
yeah, but I'm more so talking about things that you do that change the world. And now, because the world is different, like character progression paths unlock, and they have new perspectives on the world. And framing the entire DLC as all of these people have just been softly brainwashed by Mikola, and then you break the curse, and all of a sudden, all of these people who were brainwashed by him, they stick with him anyways. And it's like, no, like we're too dug in. We have to stay the course. And you can actually affect like where they go. I think Leda and the Hornsent, aren't they the only ones who are guaranteed to fight you?
Yes. I'm not sure if Mohg's like Night Guy is always an ally
Ansbach.
or not. Yeah, Ansbach. I'm not sure if he's always like on your side or not, because at least for me it was Ansbach. It was.
I don't think he can go against you. It might be that he doesn't join you, but I don't think he will ever respawn
Leda
against
can kill
you.
him in one of the permutations, and I think that's the idea. But yeah, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure Leda tries to kill him at some point. But yeah, at least for me, it was, from what I recall, it was Radahn's fangirl. It was Leda. It
Freya.
was the monk guy. The guy who's like always quiet. But he's like
Dryleaf Dane.
Yeah. The guy who fought hand to hand and stuff like that. With like,
Yeah, Dryleaf Dane.
Yeah. So like, I'm pretty sure I was definitely Moore. I don't know if Moore can. I can't remember if there's dialogue for scenarios for like if Moore would join you or not in certain scenarios, but I know for sure with mine he did not. But I did not engage with the Forager Brood questline at all. So yeah.
I think he can commit suicide.
Right.
I don't know if he joins you at any point.
Yeah. So I would agree with you. I think how they handled side characters, for the extent you do care about them, I think that's definitely something that's they've done more interesting than say they've done in the past with some of their side characters. Though again, I'm not sure whether that's better or worse, because I think it just kind of depends on the game. Like for a
totally.
You know, for a smaller scale story like the DLCs, I definitely would agree with you. It was definitely something that was an improvement. I think the problem that a lot of people have is that that's not the part of the story for the game that they really think about. For them, they think about, oh, all this cool stuff with like Mesmer and this stuff with Marika or whatever. And then they get to the ending and they're like, oh, it's this was the it was all about giving Mikola a boyfriend. This is lame.
I think you and I have talked about this, but the concept of making this DLC, and you know, there are elements of this. There's definitely an earlier version of this DLC where Radahn was a plot twist, but they were gonna prime you for Godwyn. Like, Godwyn is coming back, the final great god of the Shattering, Like this is happening. And then I love the idea of priming the player up for that, and then at the end it's just like, nah, bitch, it's the toughest of all the gods in his prime. It's Radahn. Like I like that. I think the way it's handled right now is it's kind of like the ending to Naoki Urasawa's 20th Century Boys, where I understand what you're doing here, and I really respect it. I think it's a masterpiece what you've done here.
Mm-hmm.
But people are going to have reservations, and I'm not going to tell anybody with reservations that they're wrong for having them.
Right.
Because this is flawed, but I think it is good enough that I can forgive it.
All right, so here's my position when it comes to the whole plotline for the DLC. I think, and again, I'm speaking from this from a writer's perspective, my view of this is that this was Miyazaki trying to get a lot of stuff that he couldn't fit into the main game and find a way that he could all fit it together into one coherent story here for the DLC, right? So so if you told me, oh, Mesmer's in Martin's notes about the story, I'm like, oh, I believe you. If you told me, oh, Miquella and Radahn's relationship and the promise and all this stuff there with like Malenia telling Radahn do that, all that's in the DLC, I'll be like, okay, I believe you, right? I'm willing to believe you on all that. And here's the thing, I would not mind the Miquella, we're fighting Radahn again and like Miquella thing, if it was like how they handled God of War, where it's like, okay, we're gonna like reskin Radahn and then like throw him in like some sort of little side content area where you could do that, right? Like if it was something like that or a smaller scale, I would be okay. I think the problem is that they made it where the entire narrative weight of the DLC is resting upon this, even though everyone I think would agree the more interesting part of the story is about Mesmer and his relationship with his mother, and the fact they just basically kind of make him like a mid-boss instead just kind of feels like waste. Like it's like wasted way to have structured everything, right? I get
even though they marketed the entire game on him. So like the first reveal, Miquella on torrent riding across like the shaded lands or whatever. Right. And then the moment Mesmer dropped in the first trailer he dropped in, he was the marketing material for the entire DLC.
Right, because for everybody,
you have
it was originally just
have one interaction with him.
Right. And the thing was, like, the entire, like, I understand why they start with the teaser with Miquella and Torrent, right? It's a very important little kind of like connecting bit for the lore between the DLC and the main game, right? It's alluding to a lot of important things, right? It indirectly answers some questions from the base game and the lore and stuff like that. Right? It's also, Miquella is really the only character that everyone kind of knew if there was going to be DLC, it would have to be about Miquella. So he was like the perfect character to kind of help anchor the transition. But like you said, the moment the story cinematic came out for that, it was all about Mesmer, because Mesmer was by far the most interesting character in it. And I do think that it was, I think again, like I'm trying to say, I feel like all of this background stuff or whatever we got for the plot line makes sense. But I think the problem was that they had no idea how to actually be able to kind of like include all this stuff and in a coherent way, where they're like, we have to wrap up the Miquella storyline that we kind of left hanging, but we also at the same time have to
Ymir and Midir, and like we have to do like Mitra's Mans, and we have to do Mesmer, and we have to do Ymir. It's like
we have to do
it's
Bale.
like
we have to do all
these things do not go together cleanly.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of friction on it. And again, I think they did the best they could, but it's one of those moments where I'm like, I do agree with people where I'm like, again, I am willing to accept the whole Radahn and Miquella thing, but not as like this being the main story. Like, this is what the story is about. This is what this entire DLC is building up for, is just for us to have a rematch with Radahn. And that's even putting aside like the actual mechanics that go into that fight and all that stuff, where it's just like,
apparently they fixed all of the issues. Did I tell you this?
I don't think you can salvage just like all that freaking like just spamming light show that they do.
So I beat him. Like after I think I fought him for 2 days before I finally beat him.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I was gonna do the themes of From Software video, and I was like, I need footage. I need Elden Ring footage. I'm just gonna record the Elden Ring commentary. I have it scripted down. I did the DLC, and I'd strategically saved all of my profiles and not done New Game Plus on any of them, so that I could jump to my PS4, replay the DLC like 4 or 5 times. Right. I ended up only replaying it twice before. I played it once, replayed it, and then I did the final playthrough where I recorded it.
Right.
And so I got to Consort Radahn. It's a struggle, a tough fight. There's one run, and I think I still have the recording of this, because I deleted like 12 hours of me fighting Radahn and dying. But there was one run because I first tried to fight him at Shadow Tree level 10,
Yeah.
where I got him down and I could have beat him in one hit, but I missed.
Right.
And after that, I just like fully upgraded. Screw this. I just got to get through this. And I did, finally. It took a lot of time. And 2 days later, they patched him.
Right. No, yeah, I just cheesed the fight. I was like, I'm not dealing with this. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just gonna cheese it. Also, hey, Requiem, welcome to the chat. Sorry, been a little engaged with this conversation with Acer.
Hi,
Couldn't find a good
Requiem.
pause point.
Hi, Requiem.
Yeah,
Do you
so-
have any questions?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for the Lord boys? But yeah, so yeah, like I agree with you that the DLC, it's just like it feels really glued together in strange ways in parts. But I also think this is leftover material, and I think if you take the structure of the DLC and its approach to NPC storytelling, and you were to do this again, but with a new story where you don't like have to, like you can clean up all the narrative threads and make it a more cohesive whole. I think people would see what I'm talking about.
Right. So yeah, so for where I'm at, I feel like at this point there isn't too much I feel like From Software can do without having major drawbacks in terms of how they're delivering the story. I already have like some I have some like mild critiques when it comes to how they handle exposition in Elden Ring, where I feel like, okay, you're often saying things that either doesn't need to be said or because it's, you know, reiterated somewhere else, or like it's something that anyone could put 2 and 2 together for, right? Like, and this is like I for summarize this as the Gideon Ofnir problem, where it's like, do I really need to sit here and have Gideon Ofnir give me just like all this long drops about like all these characters or whatever? It just feels so unnecessary and messy. Like, it feels like Miyazaki just doesn't have enough trust in his storytelling up until now. Just kind of let Martin's work and his characters kind of speak for themselves. He needs to have a character who's gonna like just kind of tell a player like relatively early on, oh yeah, here's the thing, and here's all these people, and you're gonna be super hyped to excited for this. It's like, I feel like if you cut Gideon's monologues, you really wouldn't lose that much. You'd still have a lot of people enjoying it and you know, figuring out and discovering the characters for themselves and how they are, right? Like, I feel like it's a bit too much how much, like, you know, they're kind of shifting away from just kind of like letting the world exist and letting it be where exposition feels like natural to this. Right. And again, they tried their hard. Like, they kind of make, you know, admittedly Gideon, like, if there's one person who's gonna like just talk your ear off about all this stuff that he knows about for no good reason, it's Gideon Ofnir, right? Like, that's kind of his character, is him just being a know-it-all. So it's one of those things where like I get what they're going for. It's one of those things where I'm like, I don't like this as a general direction for their stories going forward. And I think any mechanics that would lean into this in the future, like, I don't know, let's say there was some like type of, oh, we're gonna be able to see the past, so we're gonna see past events happen, kind of like what you get in Sekiro, right? Where like sometimes you'll get like visions of the past or whatever. From what I recall, Sekiro is very tasteful, where it uses these very sparingly. I'd be very nervous if we started seeing those become like a little too frequent in terms of how they want to deliver the story, because then it's like, at this point, why aren't we just doing cutscenes anymore? Like, if you're gonna like do it like this way, right? And at which point it's like, okay, well, now we're taking away what makes these kind of games special, where it very much feels like you're not being, I feel like the key there is trying to make it where you're not feeling you're disconnected from the gameplay experience while you are engaging in the story experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think that yeah, but I don't see like I don't think we're gonna get any drastic overhauls to any of this stuff. They are very minimalistic. They are very much about like, if you like, you probably are never gonna get the story fully on a first playthrough because you are not the target for the world. Like, the happenings in the world are not there for your convenience. Now, if you explore dutifully and you actually do the research, you can come to understand it. But your role when you're playing for the first time is just being a guy in this world. There's no reason the Tarnist, for example, would know that Moog and Morgott are brothers. There's absolutely no reason they would ever know that.
Right.
There's no reason they would know about, like, oh, Leonard, Radahn's horse. Like, there's all of this lore, all of this superfluous stuff being sealed away. I like that, because I like this idea of you just being a guy in the world. But I do agree that it has become more exposition-y. I wonder if that's a problem, because you and I, we do loot everything and we do exhaust all dialogue. So it's kind of like, the average person maybe doesn't do that, doesn't have the same problem. But
well, you could say the
like, I'm
same thing
thinking
when
about
there's
Dark
any type of
Souls.
critique of a movie or something. It's like, is everyone paying attention to every little plot beat, every little like way the dialogue is phrased or something? It's like, no, but that doesn't mean that doesn't take away from the experience or could affect people on subconscious level, right? So I do still think it's very important that you look at the holistic elements of whatever the medium is and be able to properly kind of break down and see it. And I think there's a problem where it's like, okay, if we are reiterating this in dialogue solely for the purpose of the low IQ, like, casual, just gonna smash Andes in the audience, right? And it's, again, there's plenty of people who are very well that are smart, they're totally, they're engaged, they're trying to understand the story, and sometimes they're not going to get it right. And my answer to that is, well, Miyazaki has always said, well, that's just okay, right? And he's always like twisting himself into pretzel over where he's like, I really want you to know the story, but he's always sort of prided himself on being like, well, I don't want to like make it so goddamn obvious, like in your face, right? Because he clearly has pride in his craft, So it's one of those things where I definitely feel like if you're feeling like you need to do that because you feel like not enough people are gonna get it, I feel like either A, you need to think about how you're delivering it in general then in the subtle ways that you're normally doing it, or B, you need to kind of let go and just accept some people won't do it, and that's fine, because one of the key elements is this community aspect where it's like we can get together and just discuss things. I think that's something very important with games, is that being able to, like, it's not just this, oh, I do one video about what this game means and I'm done, right? Like, there's an ongoing discussion that is always happening, right? I feel like that is something that is becoming lost with a lot of mediums as the games become basically like, oh, we're just basically delivering a movie, so you basically kind of like, we don't need to really discuss it, right? Because we're basically giving you it all on a silver platter and that cinematic experience you all like. It's like, okay, yeah, fine, but if I want to have a cinematic experience, I'd go to the cinema, right?
Yeah.
So,
I don't need Neil Druckmann to watch a good movie.
Right, exactly.
Do I sound echoey?
A little bit. It sounds like you're a little bit away from the mic.
All right, hold on.
Uh-huh.
The architecture in my room, in my apartment, it's all sort of messed up.
I can imagine.
So how do I sound now?
You sound perfectly normal. Right.
So yeah.
So yeah, I feel like, again, so that's what I'm saying. It's like when you see like in Sekiro, for example, just the ability to be like, okay, you get a little bit of it, but it's not like, let's try to supplant that in Bloodborne. Imagine a Bloodborne where when you go through Cainhurst, you're not just seeing the ghosts as the enemies or whatever. You get the occasional ghost where you're seeing, oh, it's Lawrence and it's Annalise, and they're talking about like the things they're going to do for the church or whatever, right? Like there's something where
they're
it's like,
talking about fearing the old blood when you touch the skull.
Oh, yeah, like, something very small or slight like that, like what we see, like you say, that flashback in Bloodborne. I think if you do that in small or limited amounts, you can make that work as long as, one, it still makes sense and it doesn't feel too kind of handholdy, right?
Yeah.
And I think conversely, I think the problem is when you start making this too frequent, then you're suddenly making it's like, well, what are we kind of doing here with the medium then? Like, what is kind of the point of us doing it this way if we're just going to try to deliver it as like a worse version of a cinematic, whatever, right? Like the appeal to say a visual novel or something is that, yes, it's like a novel, but you have imagery and things or sound effects or something, right, to kind of add to that experience while not trying to detract from the idea of it being a novel and you're still reading most or if not all of the details and things like that, right? Because at some point, if you start taking away the novel aspects and focus on it just being kind of like almost like, I don't know, like a paper stage play or something, then okay, well, why not I just go to see like an actual puppet show or a play or an actual film version of this, right? Instead of me watching like, kind of like a jank, like in between, not really a novel, not really a video game type idea. So
yeah,
I think stuff like that is where we have to figure out where the line is.
You're actually, this is one of those conversations, if you ever talk to like a real film buff,
right?
And you're like, hey, what's your favorite movie? And you preempt them by being like, I really like Pulp Fiction and Goodfellas.
Right.
They will look at you and they'll roll their eyes, even though like ostensibly great movies.
Right.
But they'll be like, oh yeah, well, I really like this movie made by like an Italian psychopath in his basement about how much he loves his submarine. Like the more sort of tuned in to a thing you are, whether it's a specific story, whether it's a medium, whatever it is, the more out there your takes and your like obsessions are going to be. And I would call myself a student of the great Chris Crawford when it comes to interactive narrative.
Right.
And when I recorded with him earlier this year, and
Oh.
he pointed out to me two things. One thing I knew because I'd read his books, but it was interesting that he drilled it down again in the context he did it in, which is that stories in video games are about things, but stories should always be about people. So in video games, story progress unlocks because you moved to a specific area, or
Right.
because you got the required key, or you like it's always nouns, and it's never verbs. Every other medium does verb thinking. We do noun thinking.
Right,
And
so
this
like
is
in
a paradigm
Bloodborne,
shift.
Bloodborne progression happens because doors unlock is often the meme.
Hmm. So like verb thinking in interactive storytelling is a massive perspective shift that the industry has not made, and probably won't make until he's perfected it. He did La Morte Artur, which is the sort of baseline for how you can do this.
Right.
The thing is that it's an interactive book.
Right.
It's not a video. It is a video game because it has visuals, but you don't play as a guy in 3D space shooting other guys. So the sort of large scale transition of the industry to this other way of telling stories that is more at home in this medium, it's not going to happen until somebody manages to bridge the gap. And he pointed out to me that he doesn't think it can be done because storytelling does not concern itself with space. Physical geometry does not matter in a story. If it's time for Arthur and Mordred to fight, and Arthur is here in England and Mordred is all the way over in France, you don't need to justify how they meet up. That can be an interesting story, but like their conflict does not need to rely on geometric layouts.
Right. You
And
can
if you
theoretically you can just
you can-
skip over to the confrontation
Yes.
scene, and the reader will fill in the gaps of how exactly that was accomplished, as long as it's within reason. I think there is a limit to how you can say that, but yeah, that's true. As long as something is generally reasonable, like if Arthur and Mordred,
Yeah.
like if Arthur suddenly teleported in on Mordred, you're like, well, how the hell did that happen, right? Obviously, that would be
Yeah,
a
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
But if you were able to properly, if you do it with proper framing, then yeah, I would definitely agree with that. That's definitely true.
Another thing he pointed out. I kind of lost my train of thought there. But yeah, so noun thinking and verb thinking,
Right.
and it kind of flew out of my head there. There was another observation he made, which I was really fascinated by, and I'd never heard anybody vocalize before, and I wish I could share it with you, but it completely flew out of my head
No
there.
worry, it'll come back
But,
to you. So, but yeah. So my
I'll
point is, I'm trying to say is that I
remember in
feel
an
like
hour.
again, I feel like the big strength of From Software storytelling is just the fact that it is something where you like the terms of engagement are in your court. You decide like how much you are willing to investigate and try to understand this story. It is not something that will come to you as it would in, say, a book or, say, a film where they are supplying you everything you need for the experience. And I think that is something that's very much conducive to a game like, just games in general, because it is something that only games can do, because like you said, it's about the space that the actual events in the video game have to take place and do so. Like, for example, in Elden Ring, there's oftentimes a confusing bit for people where it's like, okay, you burn the thing with Melina and suddenly you teleport into Farum Azula. What's that all about? And to a lesser extent, people have the same thing where it's like, oh, you get into the coffin and now suddenly the coffin takes you to this completely different place or whatever like this, right? I think the coffins are more explicable. I still don't have an idea on why exactly, Melina burning at the forge causes it to teleport to Farum Azula exactly. I'm sure at some point I'll understand the reason, but like for now, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, this is something that's going to get a lot of people confused, because like, how the hell do we go from one space to another? Similar to what happens with Iron Keep and Earthen Peak, right? That infamous example in 2, where it's like, oh, like how the hell is all of this? How's this all connecting together? Because ultimately, video games are a medium where, you're right, space is incredibly important of understanding how space works and relates to each other, because you're the one that has to go through it, right? And people would rather have a hard break and be like, okay, level's over, we're starting a new level, than have something where it's like, okay, well, now we're just kind of connecting things like completely illogically.
Yeah. The other thing he said, it came to me while you were talking.
Right.
because you started talking about space.
Right.
The other thing he said was that video games, like comic books, are fundamentally conceived of as an expository medium.
Right.
And that's another sort of limitation that we have to get over. So if you remember, if you like
Would
think
he
back
say video
to,
games are like experiential in as a difference? Like, did he have a specific word that he felt about it or something to that effect, or did he just think that, oh no, it's like expository versus non-expository?
he was it's not like a blanket condemnation of the entire medium. It's just this is the way in which video games evolved. He was like designing video games back in like the Atari adventure game, like text-based adventure games on the Atari 2. He was like the story designer for, I think he worked for Atari just doing that.
Right.
And he broke with the industry in like the 80s, like late 80s, early 90s, when it became obvious to him that they were not interested in storytelling. They were interested in spatial simulation.
Right.
And to him, it was just, these things do not go together. And in order to tell a story in spatial simulation land, you need to do expository. You have to, it has to be exposition. And like you can, that's fine. You know, comic books are a totally valid medium, even though they are expository.
Right.
But there is something about having to routinely pilfer from other mediums in order to tell our stories. So if you like old movies, black and white movies would just be like a thing happening. And when storytelling first became injected into it, it's just text. It's just we are using literature, the book form, literature to tell the story, and then the movie, that's just like content. Like the movie is just happenings, and then we give you the context in the real medium, which is books.
Yeah, like there's
then
a dialogue or something would happen or be said, or a narration.
And then D.W. Griffith arrives. He makes A Birth of a Nation, which is the first great movie, and the point there is that he bridged the gap. He was like, no, I will tell the story with cinema. Cinema is a language capable of speaking to people and moving people by itself.
Right.
And that's where you get like real modern movie making beginning there. Video games currently pilfer from movies. You have like cutscenes, and then video games are just like the things that you do. And then as soon as you need like the characters to emote and like the story to really happen, video games tend to just do cutscenes, because how are you going to use interactivity, just raw interactivity for storytelling?
Right.
I believe it can be done. And like going back to, we were talking about survival games earlier, like Minecraft tells a completely coherent story of a man. He's lost in the wilderness, he struggles, and then he builds his home, and like he overcomes, and he masters his environment.
Right.
Not the deepest story in the world, but all of that is conveyed purely through interactivity, and everybody who plays it can have that exact same story. The just mode of playing that game pretty organically feeds that narrative to you. Like that's basically everybody's experience when they play Minecraft. So I think interactivity can be used to tell stories, but when you want Hollywood actors and you want big sort of explosion, like when we think of stories, we think of cinema. And so yeah, like when I'm most enamored with from game storytelling, it is like interactivity. It is you went out of the boundary and you broke Mikola's curse. And now when you interact with these characters, and it's like, you know, you interact with them, you just press a button and they talk at you. But you know, still we're baby steps towards growing the medium.
Well, yeah,
this is always reflective of your actions.
Well, this is one of the things I'd have to ask is like, you can't really like, it's kind of like, you know, movies can't separate, like you won't say, oh, it's still novel based because you have dialogue in a movie, right? So I think at some point we kind of have to accept that there are some things which are just universal forms of communication, and the question is like, how do we take those like universal forms of communication and incorporate them into the unique modes of the medium? So for example, like you were saying, like when movies started to add color and sound, they're obviously in many ways they're like plays, right? Because you have like the framing of the camera and stuff like that. But what makes a movie unique is that you are able to control where the camera goes in terms of framing it in order to give you a very specific experience, right? And so movie
camera
makers,
motion and edit points and time can be like
and
toyed around
sound,
with.
manipulating sound and all that stuff. And I think the same is true for video games, where it's like you're never going to be able to completely take out all the elements that video games share with movies, books, films, TV, etc. Because those things are kind of just, at some point, they become just the building blocks. Like, it's not like, oh, this is a movie thing or anything. It's like, no, this is just like a human communication thing. And we just kind of have to accept that it is a tool in the toolbox to part of it, right? How you use and manipulate color, how you use and manipulate sound, how you use and manipulate like texture or flavor, right? I think what makes video games unique, of course, is the fact that you are simulating a space with which you interact in, and therefore the camera is no longer in the control of the movie maker, as it were, right? It's no longer in the control of the developer. It is now a matter of the player is able to choose, and how do we tell a story where the player at any point could, like, you know, some major event could be happening and the player could be like fucking off in a corner somewhere, not even paying attention to it, right? Hey, good to see you, Nobre. Hello, Chili, good to see you in here. I don't have much patience for stories in games, reading / too complex a plot, etc. I like God's Hand story, but it was a replay. It was really just the silly presentation, tone, fun cutscenes. It worked with the game. Yeah, again, this also goes down to taste. Like, there's some people who like really like deep, like high concept, you know, types of movies, and there's also people who like their, like, you know, dumb action flicks or whatever, right? And they're not too, you know, they're not too crazy about the plot or whatever. They're like, hey, if I just see like pretty explosions, cool visuals, I'm happy for the day, right?
But there, I would also say that when you're playing a video game, one thing I love about the From games is that you can put Demon Souls in, and you can have, like, yes, you have to talk to the maiden, you have to talk to the monumental. After that, you can have like 10, 20, 30 hours of uninterrupted playtime where nobody talks to you. Like, the control is never out of your hands. You can just
I've
play the game.
I've always found that minimalistic element to the From Software titles to be probably one of their biggest boon, because it's like they don't try to go overboard with cutscenes, right? The cutscenes generally they tend to be slower paced. Like, that was another complaint I had with the remake, where they tried to the remake has this general Hollywoodization problem, but like it's one of those things where it's like they were really obsessed with
where my Roman architecture went.
Yeah, so but the thing is, like, you have essentially like a bunch of essentially you have a bunch of cutscenes that are like relatively slow paced, but they're very much detached. Like, they're very much there to like set the scene. They're not focused on like the character and what the character is doing. They're often trying to like present to you exactly a lead in for like a boss fight, or for like an explanation for how this lever is going to open up this passageway or something like that, right? In some ways, you could argue they didn't need to do that much with it, and they've gotten a lot better at being able to do that without needing cutscenes for things. But it's definitely one of those things where I would still give a huge amount of credit to From Software, because they didn't have to go to the levels that they do in order to try to make it where, like, we're just going to be hands off and let the player kind of do whatever. And in many times they'll even make it where a lot of their dialogue or exposition-y beats, when they do have them, are completely optional. Like, you can completely kill Oscar, get your flask, and like move on with your day, and it won't affect you in the gameplay whatsoever. You don't need to hear any of the story framing. It's there, it exists, but it's not strictly necessary for you to be able to enjoy it as a game first and still get a decent investment in the world and narrative you're exploring along the way, right? And again, this goes back to the whole idea that From Software has been very good about just making where it's like you, the player, get to decide how much you are investing into this narrative or not, or whether you want this to purely be about the gameplay experience.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's also an addendum to what I said earlier, where, like, you know, a movie can have a scene where, like, a character just reads something and text appears on screen, and you as an audience are expected to read it, and then the movie keeps going.
Right.
It's totally valid for a movie to use literature to move its story forwards.
Right.
Just like it is, I think it is totally valid for a game to use a cutscene every now and then. Like, even like mid gameplay, just cutting to a cutscene, I think it is totally fine. What I tire of is games like, games like The Last of Us, where if you didn't have your cutscenes, you would have nothing. Right. You would have nothing. You would have whatever exposition the characters yapped at each other in the walking sequences, and you would have nothing else. Like, these games are so base formulaic, and they have so little interest in interactivity. It sickens me. It sickens me that this studio, they made Ratchet, like they didn't make Ratchet. They made Jak 3. They make Jak and Daxter: The Precursor's Legacy, and they, like, their just grasp and interest of interactivity just slides down.
I think this is a result of them learning the wrong lessons from Uncharted.
Oh, totally.
I think what they didn't realize was that the reason why Uncharted was interesting was because it had that popcorn film flavor to it, and it was very light on its actual story elements. But you could definitely see, like, as the games progress, you see this a bit in 2. It's definitely there in 3, and definitely going forward after that. They became very much obsessed with the ideas like, oh no, you're here for the story of Nathan Drake, and it's like, no one's here for the story of Nathan Drake. They're here to, climb around, shoot some bad guys, go through some action set pieces, and that type of jazz. And the less that I'm focused on, like, the story and conflict of these characters, the better, because that's what kind of I enjoyed about, like, the original Uncharted and stuff like that. Again, I've enjoyed all the games up until 3 to a lesser extent, but I would basically be like, I don't think that these have been better as a result of what they did. Now, I really enjoy The Last of Us and stuff like this, but it's definitely a game where I'm like, you could definitely do a lot more with it in the mechanics front and things like that to make it a lot more, less bare bones and just overall more interesting while still being accessible. And I would definitely agree with you that there's definitely a problem where it's like, it's so cutscene heavy that it's very much a game where it's like, yeah, I'm not surprised this would get a TV show adaptation, because, like, it basically is just a movie. Like, you cut the gameplay sequences, and you basically could just string this together as a film cutscene, right? Like, this could have been
There's
like
a
your
reason-
Until Dawn or something, right?
There's a reason the God of War TV series begins with the first Nordic one. They're not doing the Greek ones in the TV show because they didn't already do that. They can't just adapt that straight. They would actually need to, write a freaking script.
Right.
And they would need to tell a story that is something more than just a man angrily, cutting his way through, like, the temple on the back of Kronos. Like, but it's like, I think of, a game set in a desolate world like The Last of Us. I think of, tragedy and, like, the beauty of nature and all that. And I think of Shadow of the Colossus.
Right.
And that game is so beautiful, and it is so much more impactful, and it has cutscenes, but you almost don't need them. It is just they're spare. They're very rare. Like, there are some of them. They're not overly long. Don't overstay their welcome. The best one is the cutscene where the best one is the cutscene where you see the figures, the men, come into the Forbidden Lands while you're I think you're still knocked out, or you're, like, fighting someone. That's like a great cutscene.
Like, you've defeated like 3/4 of this colossi, I think, at that point.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, this is a smart use of a cutscene to just give you the player information in order to sort of change the way you experience the rest of the game.
Right.
My favorite moment.
You context of being like, oh, there's something happening. There's like there's added pressure, right? Like it's something that does add to the experience beyond of just, okay, we're just doing the same thing over again. It's like, oh, now I have to be concerned. Like, are they going to get here? Like, what's going to happen? Like, now, like, if I leave here, will have they come back when I defeat this next Like, there's definitely something where, like, it adds questions or something that definitely, I would definitely say definitely improves the experience there. I feel okay, so yeah, because Shadow of the Colossus definitely does this. This is what like I said, I'm saying this from a position of being someone who I would not criticize the original Last of Us. I enjoy it again as a story, as far as, like, writing and stuff is concerned. But like you say, as a video game, it's definitely something that they could do more with. And it's one of those things where I'm like, this didn't need to be a video game. And that is, I think, probably one of the problems I think I see with the medium is that so many people, like we said, I think Naughty Dog learned the wrong lessons, but I think this is true for so many studios where they feel like they need to be more like movies, and they don't ever think about their medium itself on how can we make these better games, right? And I think this has definitely been the problem that's been hindering, at least in the AAA space. I think indie has done a lot better job, and I think generally Japanese studios, I think, have also done a better job with this stuff. Like,
yes, I would put part of that down really to just how big anime is over there, because I think anime has sort of pulled Japan away from pursuing like crazy graphics to the same extent. Like, you still have, like, your Capcoms and such doing it.
Yeah.
But because they're still willing to experiment with different visual styles, every game with, like, hyper realistic graphics plays the same and is, like, designed the same, because there are, just objectively speaking, best practices for conveying information in realistic lighting situations.
Right.
Whereas when you have stylized games, which Japan still has in the sort of big market, big
Yeah, Nintendo's
budget
a good
market.
example of this. It has tons of
Totally.
stylized, gameplay heavy type titles.
I was just doing some exercises. That's why I'm so puffed.
No problem.
Like trying to speak, and I died.
Yeah.
But yeah, so because they are still doing stylized games, the way in which they convey information and lay out levels and characters can still have its own like unique sense, which again is harder to achieve when every game looks the same.
Well, do you think then that's going to become a problem with Unreal Engine 5 then, because Unreal Engine 5 has sort of lifted the floor for a lot of indie devs and stuff, able to do more with less resources?
It's already a massive problem with Unreal Engine 5. You see all of the trailers. So first of all, there's just genre homogenization. So like all of the trailers in every Jeff Keighley showcase is always like, this is an extraction shooter, or it's a hero shooter,
right?
Or it's like a dark fantasy game or a dark samurai game, and like they all look exactly the same. All of these hero shooters look like the same game to me. All of these From Software wannabes look exactly the same to me. And because like they're it's kind of like, you know, why was every game in the 7th generation brown and gray? Why was it all brown and gray military shooters? Because they all ran on Unreal Engine 3, and these were the pre-baked assets which came within the engine. This is what the engine was built for.
Right.
So yeah, like I am happy that Unreal Engine 5 exists ultimately. Controversial take, because something that happened during the 7th generation is that as graphical fidelity increased, the sort of gap between a small studio and a big studio became really apparent.
Yeah.
If you compare Shadow of the Colossus to San Andreas, it's not obvious that San Andreas had the bigger staff. You could be like, well, it's a bigger map, so clearly it was a bigger studio. But like, I don't know, Shadow of the Colossus is vastly more impressive as a piece of technical work, so why wouldn't that have had a bigger budget?
Right.
Whereas in the 7th generation, the difference between a $10 million game and a $100 million game, you can see it on the screen.
Right.
And this gap is now beginning to close again, because every single, like a 10% increase for AAA developers, now it's like 100% increase for smaller developers.
Right.
So the mid-range game is slowly and steadily being revived, just because the tools to facilitate its production are happening again. And like, you know, I'm a big publisher. I make a bunch of big games. I could spend $500 million on this one game, or I could spend $500 million on these 10 games that basically look exactly the same as that one game. Which am I going to make? I'll make the smaller games, you know.
Right. Well, do you think Expedition 33 and its success at the Game Awards show is like sort of the final confirmation of that then? Or do you think that that's going to go, that people are going to interpret that the wrong way as well?
There's always going to be some jerk off there's always some jerk off with a lot of money to learn the wrong lessons, I've noticed.
For sure. Well, my rule has always been, like, I forget who said this, but someone I think very wise once said that what you have to accept is like basically 90% of anything is going to be shit. Like that's just going to happen. It is to do so. If you ever like, oh no, this was like really good once, and then like modernity or popularity ruins, like no, what happened generally is that you'd have very few people working on it, and so therefore the small success cases look like they're a lot better than the relatively few failures or whatever, but it's ultimately only the same thing, and just more popularity just means more exposure to the failures and things like that. So I definitely feel like it's one of those things where for sure there's always going to be just a lot of you know, crap that is just going to be sorted out by the market and things like that. Like eventually people are going to be kind of like, you know, we're not going to do that, right? But then people, like, you roll your eyes.
People look back at Looking Glass Studios and they're like, "Well, games used to be so great." And like, yes, the conditions of Looking Glass Studios are not replicatable today. But like, Looking Glass Studios didn't make every game back in the day. Most games back in the day were shovelware.
Right.
And like, that's also another change that is coming, which is that back in the day you had something like Looking Glass Studios.
Right.
And the average game designer in like the 1980s into the 1990s, even like the early 2000s, the average game designer was like a 130, 140 IQ nerd, some white guy from California who had like a crazy obsession with Lord of the Rings, and he taught himself how to write BASIC, and he just showed up outside the studio and was like, I'm super autistic. I know everything about classical storytelling, and I also know everything about like World War II. You're making a World War II game. Let me program it. And then he just built them an engine out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
That was the average game designer back in the day. And now the average game designer is substantially less impressive.
Right.
Because you have so many more of them. So when you have a studio that is 20 of this guy,
right,
it is almost inconceivable that they're going to make anything less than a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
But now most studios don't even have one of this guy. Like who do you think is the smartest person working over at, you know, I'm not going to name a real studio. I'm not going to put anyone under the bus here, but like, you know, somebody like what's his name? He was the godfather of those the godfather of BioWare game design.
Casey Hudson?
BioWare.
No.
No. He was not the director.
Oh,
he was the game designer. No. His name.
Oh.
His name was. Let me ask the AI. You know, I'm not one of these 140 IQs geniuses who taught himself to program. I'm one of the chuts who has to use the internet because I'm too old to remember name.
There we go.
But yeah, he like laid out the Baldur's Gate games, and I think he even worked on like Planescape Torment, or maybe that was Black Isle. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of work for them. But like, you know, James Olin. James Olin is his name.
Oh yeah, I remember that name. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, that guy is, you know, today he runs a hedge fund. Like that guy today.
Oh, really?
He's not. No, I'm not saying like.
He would. Okay.
Yeah. It's like a guy of this incredible talent would no longer be funneled into like, yeah, you can be a grunt worker in like some 2-bit studio up in California that is constantly going bankrupt. Like this guy today, the colleges are grabbing him and they're putting him to work on some fake job where he moves numbers around.
Right.
So I think the quality pool of game designers has dropped, not because there are fewer impressive people necessarily, just because when you have bigger studios, you don't have as strict a consolidation of high quality staff.
Well,
and when you look at companies,
the staff at least theoretically don't need to be that high quality to perform some of the tasks, especially when there's a hyper specialization problem, right? Like, is there an issue where you get people where it's like, oh, my thing is just doing the reflections on water, and then like, oh no, I'm out of a job because they don't want me to do reflections on water. They say it's unnecessary.
Back in the day, that guy also did the sound design and he also did the marketing. Right. You know.
Yeah, because you have like 20 people on staff, so you'd have a lot of people doubling up.
Yeah, totally. And everybody knew how to do everything. Right. But so what's happening is that and like if you have like a really good game, like a really good director in charge of the project, you can just surround him with a bunch of assholes, just like people who know nothing, and he'll still make it work. I believe in auteur theory in that sense. But so there's also just like massive restrictions on like creative liberties because budgets are so crazy. Right. But what I do, so like there probably is the same quality of staff still around. It's just been flooded with these people who are not quite as talented. So the quality goes down and budgets are crazy. So it's harder to experiment. But going to like Clair Obscur or Expedition 33, if you look at that and you look at Silksong, and you look at From Software, look at Nintendo, studios that thrive are the studios that keep like staff retention. From Software has people working there today who worked on the first Kingsfield.
Right.
Like they keep their people. Because this is your talent. They don't bleed talent. This is your talent. Having them work together for 10 years. You can't like just fire one guy and hire someone who's completely foreign to the company and have him like just pick it up. Like, no, it takes years to build a real collaborative bond with somebody, and like the technical know-how and like the history with the studio. You can't replace this by just hiring some newbie off the street who doesn't know anything because he'll do it for less money. And when you look at like the companies that are floundering, I mean, Ubisoft is, I believe, going to just be bought up by a bunch of Saudi Arabian oil fund people, and then going to be like, I believe Square Enix right now is in the middle of being hijacked by this Singaporean investment firm. That's just you know they're gonna fire half the staff, replace them with AI, release absolute garbage games, and then just sell off the IPs and close the whole. Like, you know exactly what's gonna happen here.
Well, yeah. Well, honestly, I just think Square Enix in general has been in much of a rut. So I think that's more so a symptom of like Square Enix's own mistakes and failings that have put them in that position where they are going to get bought off by that, right? And I think that's sort of the problem, is that like there's a sense of mismanagement, which, like you said, is partially driven by so many people. Sort of like game development staff are scaling up too fast for the level of skill and expertise that the managers are able to handle. They don't I feel like did this happen recently with the Red Dead studio, where after what was it?
Dan Houser left.
Well, but wasn't it after what's it called? The 77 game, it got an anime adaptation. Cyberpunk, there we go, yeah. So when Cyberpunk. Yeah, so when Cyberpunk became had like its big controversy or whatever because of how bad it was on consoles or whatever, they ended up having from what I remember, they did an entire restructure of just how they handled their studios and stuff, so they could help cut red tape and just generally become more leaner and more efficient. And that's something where it's like you need a lot of developers to go through and actually think about that, because it happens in anything that gets big or whatever. At some point there's corporate bloat, and you just need somebody who's going to go through and be like, we need to be able to not just cut, but be able to cut responsibly and intelligently, so that way we are able to actually get away with having these big projects or whatever with all these staff, and it's not going to be having us constantly stepping on each other's toes, being completely bogged down in committees and all that stuff, right? Like, you need to be able to make it where people can just kind of do things and act spontaneous and move things around, so that way you can actually have so I think we could actually be able to have things just happen and be able to kind of be put together in a more fluid environment, because I think that is what the problem is that you have a lot of kind of rigidity, and that causes a lot of people that maybe aren't necessarily good in the job, or maybe their job is redundant, or maybe there's a lot of things where that just kind of builds up over time, and as a result you end up having all these problems which compound. I think Bethesda's definitely had a bit of this problem as well, right?
Bethesda, so Todd Howard, he doesn't really do game design anymore,
right?
Apparently Todd Howard, he's just managing everything, and he has I think that the quest designer for Starfield never once talked to Todd Howard during the entire time of development.
Mm-hmm.
So this is two problems here. One is you're talking about management. Managing 20 people who all know each other, that's really easy. You don't really need to manage 20 people. You just sort of need to, if the ship is going off course, you just tap the steering wheel and it rights itself.
Right.
Managing 500 people, that is not a skill that the average game designer has. That is a skill which military generals have. Very few people actually are capable of organizing this amount of people.
And I'd say the generals with the quality we have right now, it's definitely in rare supply still.
Well, okay, we want to get a bit into militarism here. I don't think the problem with if you're talking about winning wars and America's sort of endless business of forever wars, I don't think that's on the generals.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actually just quality of generals themselves. But again, that's neither here nor there. That was just a snide comment.
But like I was saying, I think it's largely you have people who don't know how to organize large groups, and you have this management problem of just we keep running into bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, and so much of this production pipeline could just be cleaned out if you could fire 90% of the HR department, fire 90% of the marketing department, and get rid of every single producer and executive. Just they don't get to breathe down my neck.
I'll be
Every
honest,
year,
I'm not
I
sure
give
what
them.
the benefit of a marketing department is anymore. I really don't understand it, especially in the age of
No,
new media
no.
and stuff like that. I'm just really
Yeah.
like, I feel like it is complete. Like their job, I feel is a dinosaur, and I don't know why it hasn't gone extinct already. I feel
it's
like there's
also-
just so little benefit to actually having a marketing department, like at least a large one. Like you could, again, I think you could get away with just having one marketing designer and then having him just hire people. It's like, okay, you handle like the Twitter account, you handle the Instagram or whatever, right, like that, and then you just like kind of like rely mostly on just building up rapport. I feel like
Word of
that's the most
mouth and
important.
such.
I feel like that's the
Yeah,
most
but
important
it's
thing right
also
now.
it's also like marketing as a discipline. This is a really ridiculous discipline. Like there's
Yeah.
interesting psychology in this and like tricks, but when you notice with marketing is that when was the last time you saw an ad for a video game and you thought, wow, this looks really interesting?
Never.
Versus when was the last time you looked at an ad for a game and you said, wow, this looks like every other ad I just watched?
Oh yeah, that's
Because it's like
that's
it's
definitely a
like these
problem.
marketing people have got like it's like these like it's like executives look at marketing and they're like, you know what, these guys sell the product, they're the ones who matter, so these game designers, they need to listen to the marketing guys and we need to design games which they can market. But it's like, no, asshole, a good marketing team should be able to sell anything. They should be able to sell even games that aren't obviously marketable.
Well, the problem is they try to do that, and we see what the result is. They make it look like every Hollywood schlock that you've seen before, and usually with some really
Yeah.
cringy modern music where you're like, why the fuck is this here? What does that anything to do with the game? Huh? Like,
Yeah,
wasn't that at
totally.
the Game Awards or something? I'm sure there was at least one or two trailers that were like that.
Lords of the Fallen uses like rock music, and it's so out of place. They did like Iron Maiden for the first one, I think. This time they did some other one. It's just like you're cribbing from Software's style, but you have a Western sort of Diablo visual design, which is, you know, it's fine, it's whatever.
Right.
Now like you're playing this rock music behind it. It's like, what? Who is this clash for? Who looks at this? Like, I would be much more interested in these trailers if you just had like beautiful like Latin opera or something in the background.
Uh-huh. Well, for me, I always kind of think about it's like what is the purpose of having like a trailer or whatever, right? It's to usually get you hyped, and usually cinematics will do that. But I think one of the problems with cinematics is that a lot of people over rely on them in place of gameplay. So you don't really know what the game's about. You know what? Oh, this really cool little like compact piece of storytelling is really nice, but I don't know if that's going to translate into the game in any meaningful way, right? Like you see this with like MMOs and like with gacha and things like that, where you have like this really high productions.
Mobile games.
Right. No, I get it. And I say again, I'm someone who's currently playing a gacha. Again, I enjoy that stuff or whatever, but like, let's not pretend like that's like necessarily something where it's like, you know, you cut all that stuff apart, it's not going to affect the game and vice versa. Like the game is not being made better because of the trailers or anything like that. So like the trailer is ultimately a product or a means for you to kind of like build a well, in the case of like gacha, like Honkai Star Rail, there's like a storytelling ecosystem being created there, so there is sort of like a synergy there, and that's like something that's really special. But again, I'm not here to talk about like good marketing. I'm talking about the bad marketing. So like one of the problems that I'm seeing is that a lot of times is like the trailers just sort of exist to kind of just like either A, they're cinematic pieces that don't mean anything, or B, when they are when they are supposed to be like gameplay things, they tend to be kind of like meaningless. Like you don't really get a lot of sense of like clearly what you're looking at, and the music and the dialogue or whatever, it just kind of cribs from every cringy like Hollywood trailers you see now. And it's absolutely awful.
It is indistinguishable from generative AI. It's just like
at that point,
it looks like everything else.
Which is why I'm just saying, why don't we just cut the marketing department and just put it to the AI at least if you're gonna do that.
Yeah, like marketing. Look, if somebody listening to this works in marketing, like I don't want you to lose your job. I want you to have like a good life and all that. But you do understand that your job is pretty ridiculous, right? But yeah, so
my thing is that like you don't need a marketing department. You need like maybe one person and a bunch of like grunt works, which again you could theoretically also like give that to a bot or something, because they just do whatever like the one manager says. Because again, I think that's another thing. It's like it's one of these things where there's a lot of like busy and like grunt works and stuff where you don't need to have a full-time developer staff that's like dedicated to this. Maybe you have one guy that handles all the social media, right? Like I can understand seeing that, but you definitely don't need like,
like handles having good relationships with like streamers and let's players and content creators, stuff like that.
Like you don't need an entire department of like 10, 20, like 30, like 50 people to do this. And like you said, when people start building it around, because like, oh no, these are the people we have to listen to because they'll make their job easier. It's like, no, your job is to make the product as good as possible. So like we shouldn't be trying to cater to what you think might be good for it. We should just make the product, and then you're like, okay, here's the strong points of the product, here's what's good about the product. I'm going to talk to the storytellers to figure out anything about the product, on what tone or something they're going for, and then we're going to try to figure out how we're able to sell that to the product, sell the product. That is what like you should be doing, and a lot of that just isn't happening, I think. But in terms of like actual gameplay and like, you know, storytelling discussions on this, I think I feel like one of the things that has happened over the course of it, and this is mostly, again, like you said, I think in the Japanese scene, is that there is just a lot of authorship, I think, just in Japanese culture. I don't know if that's changing or not. I haven't like looked into this recently, but I do think that it's very, very much true in the last decade or so. Like Japan would be the ones that would come out with a lot of the really inspired auteurs that would like do kind of wacky, zany, or like really high concept type of low concept type of work, because just because of the fact that like that was just sort of like the culture that was being built around in the gaming space around there. And I think that's sort of like Japan is reaping the benefits of having that exist for so long, that you have a lot of legacy figures that are doing that. I don't
totally like you look at like what's his name, Yamauchi, who used to run Nintendo, like a tyrant. This guy was just a vampire. He would demolish and destroy people. He was like a soulless, cruel sociopath. But when it came to Shigeru Miyamoto and like Miyamoto making his little games, nobody messed with him. Like if you are an executive and you tell Miyamoto to do something, Yamauchi is going to fire you. He protected Miyamoto, and because he did, Nintendo is now the company it is. You look at like Sony and Team Ico, like how they fostered and protected Fumito Ueda and his people. How Konami, like, okay, Kojima, like bad outcome at the end, but like,
well, that the problem is really Konami like, there at that point. Like that's just kind of
and you know, Kojima maybe wasn't the greatest guy to work with, but like you look at the leash he was given because he proved himself to be really driven with this. Right. And like Team Silent Hill. Do you know how Team Silent was formed?
Nope.
So what happened was Konami had a bunch of troublemakers in all of their departments, and they couldn't fire them because of like Japanese like customs of not firing people too easily. Right. So they just rounded all of the troublemakers together, put them in this studio here. Your Team Silent, be silent. They didn't say that, but it would be funny. And they were like, the point here is to just remove these people from the functional studios so that they don't drag the work elsewhere down. And then they brought in Keiichiro Toyama and told him, like, we want you to make a game with an American feeling. And he just went off, like, they went off to the races and they made Silent Hill. And Konami, I think Silent Hill, like, it was never a massive cash cow for Konami. It was like a known brand, but it didn't sell crazy or anything.
I think what Silent Hill did was it created I think this is true for most horror. I think horror is never going to be a big seller. I think EA's biggest mistake with the Dead Space franchise is always assuming that somehow it's going to be this big blockbuster like Call of Duty seller.
Ridiculous.
Like, I don't know how the hell you have these types of expectations. Budget accordingly, you dumbasses. But the point is that,
and also the new one made money, but you're still gonna put it on ice. Like what?
Well, here's the thing. I get if they're like, okay, we made a profit, but we didn't make a big enough, right? Like you don't want to like go in and put like, I don't know, like $5 million in and you get like 5.2 million back. It's like, okay, yeah, I made money, but like I want to make like 5 times what that's executive brain, and I'd like to push back. Mm-hmm. The reason, like, if they released a Mario game today, apropos of nothing, no history of Mario, nobody would buy it. Like, okay, you play as a weird Italian plumber and you punch blocks and fight mushrooms and turtles. Nobody would buy Mario if he was being introduced today. But Nintendo, they cultivate their audience. And like, you know, maybe Dead Space would sell a lot more
if you kept the series alive, if you like made more games, like budget them, like smaller budgets, definitely. But it's the same with like.
Again, I agree with you, but that's what I'm saying is like I get the thinking. The thing is that the problem that these devs have is like, why are you thinking like if you're executive brained, you should be executive brained enough to understand that different genres sell at different rates, and it doesn't matter how much money you pump into a horror game, it is still a horror game. And if you try to then make it an action game instead, then you're going to alienate your horror audience. So you just need to kind of accept that a horror game is going to be cultivating an audience of a certain size. You need to budget that accordingly. And then if you want to be like a Resident Evil where you're making, you know, maybe a little bit more than the average horror franchise or something like that, then you need to be like, yes, we need to focus on building over time. This is going to be a long-term investment.
Yeah.
And the focus should be more on not necessarily the immediate profits, but on building a brand and recognition, so that way people be like, okay, we don't have this huge seller, but everybody knows what Silent Hill is. You will know what Silent Hill is. I know what Silent Hill is. Everybody knows what Silent Hill, and everyone knows that Silent Hill is awesome and beloved. And that's something you want to be able to say, because then you could sell to investors or whatever. We're the ones who know. We don't just make the big selling games. We also make the classic games that people want to remember and play and talk about, right? Because that's what's also very important, is not just the monetary value, but keeping yourself in the conversation, so that way you'll always be there, so people will be more willing to be able to pay the money for something else you come out with, right? Like
From Software, From Software is the exact same thing. Demon Souls comes out. Every single executive hates it. They look at it and they're like, this is dumb.
Right.
15 years later, Elden Ring comes out. It's the best-selling game of the year after Call of Duty. And it's like, hey, geniuses, it sold 20 million copies because they had time to cultivate an audience for this.
And iterate upon it as well, right?
Iterate, yeah, and like, look, it's kind of like a fluke that Dark Souls like started selling really well, because it's like, oh, this game is so hard. But it's like, no executive could have made this happen.
Right.
No executive could have made that happen.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. Nobody could have predicted this.
Right, and that's the thing, though. You have to make the assumption that there's always going to be random stuff where something could end up working out even better than you expected because of some factor that you can't possibly predict for in some sort of like, you know, formulaic spreadsheet or something like that, right? That is something that you always kind of have to build in, that could happen. You shouldn't bet on it, right? But you have to. It's like you're never going to be able to see those types of results if you don't keep trying or putting results in it, right? And that's the thing, is that you have to be able to see the potential in something, be like, okay, I got a fish. I got to like leave the line out for a little bit, give it a chance to kind of like, you know, be a little tempting for the fish, but eventually they're gonna bite. And that's the thing, is that you have to actually put it out there. You have to cast your line.
But also, that's also a problem, and this is like being ameliorated. I talked earlier about how modern game engines empower small creators more.
Right.
But one problem that happened in the 7th gen was that video games all of a sudden started making hundreds of millions of dollars, and these video game companies became like massive firms. And to handle all of that money, they started hiring these business executives who had absolutely no interest in video games.
Right.
And so Andrew Wilson shows up at EA and he's like, more FIFA, more Madden, everything else just like, we don't, like, we can't optimize sales figures for that, so we'll just drop it.
Right.
Whereas what you want, obviously, as an industry, like video games, you would want every single executive in the video game industry to have at least an interest in video games.
Right.
Like, it's like, oh, we're going to hire the new executive of the Walt Disney Company. He's never seen a movie. Like, he just looks at spreadsheets all day.
Well, you
it's
can
like,
make an argument that already happened.
Yeah, but it's like, you know, I get that on one hand. There is there's like a story about a man who made all of his money like trading in green timber. And when he finally he like was retiring, and he was like, I'm gonna visit them, like he visited one of these sites where they'd been selling the timber.
Right.
And when he got there, you know, he saw timber all over, and he was like asking people, hey, where's the green timber? Where's all the paint? Green timber is freshly cut timber.
Right.
It's, you know, it's still green on the inside. He didn't know that. He still made a lot of money in the industry because his speciality was just in like trading of the material. How the material comes together wasn't relevant for him. But, you know, that doesn't apply to video games, because the audience for video games, this is an entertainment brand. This isn't a utilitarian, like, I need this, like these measurements. It's, I need something that speaks to me. Like, this interests me.
Right. Well, the problem
so you need to think about it differently.
The problem is that the executives struggle with being able to quantify how how the complexities of genre, branding, socioeconomic environments of like, the surrounding that, obviously culture, like these are things that are not easily quantifiable. It can't be done. You need there's definitely ways to poll and collect data on this stuff. I don't know how good a lot of these larger scale companies do on that, which might be another problem, is that they just have really shitty polling and all the polls give them wrong data to work with, which it doesn't matter how good, it doesn't matter how like skilled or talented you have. If you have bad information, you're going, bad information in, bad product out. Like that's just inevitable, right? So like I think that's definitely something that could also be contributing to it, where it's like you don't understand how it is. And that's where like intuition works. Like you said, in the Japanese side, it's like, okay, we're going to protect our tours because we may not necessarily understand them or whatever, but we can recognize that they have some sort of ingenuity that is super highly valued and something that is super rare that we need to be able to cultivate and keep, right? Like they were able to identify that and understand it, even if it wasn't always giving them the big bucks every time and right away. And I think that is definitely something that that you need to be able to let kind of like thrive and everything like that. Like, okay, going back to our topic on the idea of, gameplay and story, one of the games I would love to see you play and give a review on or whatever, because I think more people need to have a blind experience for this, is for 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. And you have the developer you have the developer Vanillaware. They've been doing their type of games with their unique and like really beautiful art style that you don't really see anymore in gaming for like a really long time. And then they come out with like this masterpiece right there that really is able to lean into the fact that like, you are a video game and you don't need to tell a linear story in the same way as everybody else. And it creates like this really fascinating narrative that, to go back to what you said, it not only appeals to the Let's Play audience, but it also still just appeals to like players in general, because it is something that is so personal and so specialized to like you and your choices and something you can't repeat. Like it's one of those things where it's like, man, I wish I could wipe my memory and like go through the experience for this all over again, right? Because it would be something that'd be so special and different, right? And I think that's something that I feel like a lot of like, you're just not seeing that, I think, a lot in Western studios. And I think, again, we've talked about like a lot of different reasons for that, but I definitely, again, my biggest concern would probably be like, you're going to see a lot of developers as they grow and they become more corporate, that they're going to run into this problem where it's like, oh, we have to Westernize. We have to be more like what we have to listen to what the Westerns say, in the same way that we said like, oh, we have to listen to what the marketing department says. Like, oh, we have to listen to what our PR people is, because we're going global now and we need to be able to appeal to global audience. Like, no, global audiences liked what you were making already. You don't need to be appealing to the global audiences. You need to be building the fan base to your audience, period. Because there is no such thing as a global audience,
right?
Because if you imagine a game made for a global audience, you are imagining a soulless, empty experience that nobody would be interested in.
Right.
Nobody. There's nothing made for everybody that is any level of good.
Mm-hmm. Especially when it's so, especially when the industry is so obsessed with trying to create that like there's just so much of it out there where it's just like this very generic schlop.
Yeah.
It just ends up making it where it's like it's so hard to be able to. I don't even say to like recommend, but it's like it's so hard to be able to like kind of weed through, like especially with games like prices getting up to like $80 and stuff. It's like, what the hell am I supposed to be making, right?
Yeah, and like it takes so long, and you can't really experiment, because if you start making experiments now, you're like undoing years of work, and it's just like iterating upon this idea. It's going to take another 5 years, and
right.
It's just like it is kind of crazy. But like returning to AA's and that sort of becoming a viable business model again. My games, Tales of Skeletons, whom everybody must wishlist, of course.
Indeed,
my Grift.
Naturally. I have it wishlisted 3 times at this point.
You're the guy who keeps unwishlisting it. No, but it's not going to sell 100,000 copies. I imagine it's going to be a modest hit, and I'm going to be very satisfied with anybody buying it at all. But let's say it has like breakout success, like it's a streamer picks it up and like people like play it. Like every now and then you see, like probably every week there is a game like everybody is sort of getting around. Like there's big games like Peak, that sort of mountain climbing game that was big for a couple of weeks.
There was also like Fall Guys was a thing like that.
Yeah. That was much bigger, like Among COVID Us, and stuff like that.
Was another one.
Yeah. Like again, COVID lockdowns. but like imagine it just gets some sort of like soft success where it's like it sells 100,000 copies.
Right.
Logi, 100,000 copies, that's me done. Like I don't ever need to work again. I can live off of that money for like what, a decade, 2 decades. Like I get like, and that sort of freedom, and then I can just make the next thing, and that is more and more becoming viable for creatives in this space. So I think that's really the most interesting thing about the industry right now, is that if you're talented and if you can somehow harness enough attention, like if you can just get attention from people, you just like build good relationship with other creators or whatever.
Well, this is what we're saying with social media earlier. It's like you don't need the big marketing developments, because you can just go out there straight to the people, essentially, right? Like you now have a digital public square. Like it still amazes me when I bother to check the stats for my website, where I'm just like, oh, I have like 80 people from Korea that are now like looking at it. I'm like, oh, what? Like, I'm like, I don't know what happened, but I guess somebody in Korea shared my stuff, and a lot of people now are reading my stuff in Korea today. Like, it's like, and like I have, obviously like US is always gonna be number 1, and then usually it's like Italy in second or something like that, and then like
I'm told China is number 1.
Well, like
it's not true.
In terms of like readers for my web, it's purely my website or whatever. Like sometimes I'll get like a Hong Kong or a China or whatever, but I don't see that often from the Chinese side. I've gotten a lot of emails from the Chinese side and things like that, so I definitely know my stuff has gotten out there. But I think generally it gets filtered to Chinese creators who will then like kind of use my work as a reference and stuff like that. But like what I'm talking about in terms of like the fact of the matter is like I'm just a guy who's keeps my stuff basically generally in English. Like I don't even market to the Japanese side or anything at all, and yet I still am occasionally seeing like, oh, like 20 people from Japan are looking at it today. Well, how the hell did that happen? Like I didn't even share with any friends today. So it's like it's one of those things where it's like that stuff happens and it gets around or whatever. Like you are able to reach so many people, right, just by putting yourself out there. So like I think it's so much easier now for smaller scale studios to do it. And like you said, the random virality, there is a problem where sometimes developers seem, especially on the indie side, seem to try to be pumping out games with the idea to lean into the idea of, well, if we pump out like 20 cheap games and one of them gets viral, it'll pay for the cost of all the others and then some. It's like I don't think that's a smart business model. I think that's just like, like you can't like predict for that. Like you can't be able to like reliably do that. It's kind of like I don't know, like trying to win the lotto or something like that. It's something where it's better where like you kind of just price in like, maybe it'll be viral, maybe it's not, but like try to work within like a limited bounds of what you're at like realistically going to get. And I think that's something where it's like, you don't need the huge marketing costs for that, because you're able to basically work within your means to tell it. I think that was something that was helped along with like startups like Kickstarter and things like that, right? And I think that, like you said, like stuff like Expedition 33 proved that you can have something like the Unreal Engine 5. Now, again, I've heard that like, like people on the programs are like, oh, hey, look, they're using like this funny like base, like, I don't know, you buy this from like the store or whatever you have for the engine or something like that for some like, like basic animation or something they're having. It's like, well, listen, if 90%,
like,
90%,
who cares?
like, who cares? Like, like the audience member doesn't care if they bought like a basic like animation pack from the store or whatever, as long as it looks good on the end product, right? Like that's ultimately what matters. Like, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people have this. Like, there's this. Remember that stupid controversy over Elden Ring because it was like reusing like animations or things. Like, oh, it's the same door opening animation that they used back in Bloodlord. It's like, well, yeah, like
this door animation doesn't work anymore. We need a new one. It's like, no, man, you don't need a new one.
Yeah, like that was something where I was like, here's the thing. I get it with reusing assets where it's like, oh wow, look, it's the Dark Souls 3 doors. Like, there's definitely a case where you could be like, okay, like. Like, really, you guys couldn't make something like new or unique or special for that? But like, do they really need to? Like, do I really care if they're reusing all the Dark Souls 3 grays when they had like 20 of those in Dark Souls 3? Like, yeah, like why not? Why not get some value out of it? You could focus on the other assets that we really do enjoy that are super unique or something like that in Elden Ring. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. Even if you want to be critical about it. So like, it's one of those things where I feel like, like, there's always going to be people who will complain about stupid stuff that doesn't really matter, right? I hope the developers I hope developers
aren't going to be leaning into those things, right? Like I feel like there was a bit of that in terms of like the graphic side of things, where everything be like, oh my god, the graphics, like how could this water not look like this? Like I feel like if you set the proper expectations of what your game is supposed to be and you keep consistent within those expectations across it, there's not going to be a problem. If you're making a super hyper realistic like Unreal game and then the water looks bad, then yeah, I can understand why people are complaining, because like I was told an experience of this super realistic thing and then like this like took out my immersion now, because that wasn't what I was being sold initially. But if you're making a stylized game, like you've said, like that, no one cares about how good the water looks. Does it fit with the style of the game?
The most useless human being in the world, you know, it's probably like, it is that guy who posts on Twitter like RTX off, RTX on, and the water reflection looks slightly different, and you're like, you're asking people to buy an $800 RAM upgrade to run this so that the water reflection can look slightly more realistic.
Right.
It's just like it has gotten to a point where you people are not fans of video games. You people are fans of graphics. Like you like real-time rendered graphics. That's cool. You can play Crysis 3 and you can just mod that to look really good, and you can do that for eternity. Stay out of gaming discourse. You have nothing to contribute anymore. Like I'm so serious. Like the graphics is done. Games are like like more powerful machines are gonna come. You're not gonna get it more realistic than it is right now. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna have to be through generative AI, and nobody wants that. Nobody, not even the people who think they do want that. They don't want it either.
Yeah, I'm very curious how AI is going to end up affecting developers both in the short term and the long term, because I'm expecting there's always growing pains when it's trying to figure out how to incorporate new technology into workflows. Like that's that's kind of like inevitability. But I'm going to be curious how that's going to affect the general landscape and stuff, because you're probably going to get a lot of like low effort, like, you know, kind of like the shovelware type games, right? Where they're going to
you already have. Do you mean half of the PlayStation Store? There's no quality control. It's so trash.
I do not look at like, you know, I do not like regularly look at my Steam or my PlayStation Store or whatever. I am a little too old school where I'm just like, okay, is there a game that I've heard about? Is there a game I want? Is there a game that I've come across because like, I don't know, like a YouTube recommendation? Like that for me is generally like how I find out about my games. I do not go browse and be like, oh yes, let me look at one of the newest things that came out today on the PlayStation Store. Yes. Ah, I see. Hentai Simulator 2.0. Good to know. Yes. Like it is just
like with AI, I know the Expedition 33 team, they did use generative AI for some textures, and then they patched out all the bad ones later. Like AI,
there we go.
AI is a lot like NFTs. Do you remember the old days when it was NFTs?
Like, wasn't that like 3 years ago?
But yeah, so like NFTs, if you like look at NFTs objectively,
right?
This is really, really interesting technology that has deep applications in a lot of things. But because you people have made it synonymous with just get-rich-quick schemes and grift and scams, nobody wants this technology.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like it's going to definitely slow down the innovative uses that it could have in terms of the wider ecosystem. That's for sure. Yeah,
because like nobody wants to be like, yeah, I'm working on NFTs. Because if you're actually working with this technology, you always have to also say, but look, I'm not doing the stupid monkey pics. Like I'm doing this to like track payment systems across different banking sectors in Southeast Asia or something. It's like there are uses for this that are interesting, and then there's scams.
Right.
AI has a lot more real applications than NFTs did, but it's also like a lot of just like the word slop is used for a reason. In my experience, AI is really bad at programming. It can give you functional code, but the time you need to clean it up, because like AI doesn't understand context.
Well,
so
it
you
doesn't
really
understand
need to
anything. Period. It's purely.
Well, you know what I mean.
I get what you're trying to say. It's just I think the problem with AI is the fact that we call it AI when it's not really that. It's more like predictive models essentially. Where
but like it doesn't understand context. So you need to like really drill in what you want if you want it to program something for you, and in the time it takes you to do that, and then also fix the code to more properly align with what you were thinking about, you could have just programmed it yourself. Like a good coder is still faster than AI. And the thing is that, people say, oh, AI is just going to get better and better. AI is going to get deeper. I don't think it's going to get better. Because like I have not seen AI improve like graphically. Yeah, well, see, the thing is like so one issue in like genre classifications, I posted on Twitter about this, is that you can never define something so perfectly as to capture all use cases and not exclude some.
Right.
AI fundamentally cannot be made to understand nuance and context the way people do, because it's not a thinking machine. Like it doesn't have lived experience.
Yeah, this is one of my problems with AI for translations and stuff, where I'm like, I just don't know how you could be able to have an AI be able to be a predictive model for all the complexities in language, because there's so much about language that exists within the specific time and context of when it's made, when it's being translated. Like there's just so many factors there. I just don't know how it would be possible for an AI to be able to do it. Now, again, I'm not going to discount and say, well, maybe they can do it, but I agree with you. It's one of those things where I'm like, I just don't understand how it would be possible for you to be able to simulate that, right?
And I have not seen AI improve drastically in these domains at all since they became available to the public. What the AI is useful for is, so there are two. Okay, so the grapple hook in my game and one boss, I did use AI for, because what I need, like I had coded both of them from beginning to end.
Okay.
And then I decided I'm going to add functions. So the boss is like a gigantic sort of, these Zelda bosses, just big face, hand, and then he attacks you.
Right.
I decided I'm going to add an animation to the boss where the eyes can track you independently. And also the mouth can open and move, and also he can vomit. And I just like layered different sprites to sort of animate him. And I did all the math for that. It was, I spent probably a week or something just putting all of this together. And then I needed to group variables out of every single state in the game, in the object, and I needed to group them here in its own state. And I was like, you know what? I could spend a day just ripping this code apart and reassembling it, or I could just tell the AI exactly what to do with this code, and it did it. So it's like, oh, okay, this is actually a really good use for AI. It speeds up me having to clean up the code. Mm-hmm. Another good use, and this is basically the same thing happened with the grapple hook, but there it was very poor economic coding, so I had like these 50 lines repeated in these 10 different use cases or whatever, when really this could have just been the one case, and then you just update it and it just says like, if the state is this plus this, then run the code, and it would have been like a catch-all system rather than having to script out each individual instance. Mm-hmm. So like AI is actually quite useful for cleaning up code. I have tried programming with it from the ground up. It is useful for like fetching built-in engine functions. Mm-hmm. It is not good at building its own code. Like the code it gives you works. Like 90% of the time it'll work, but you do always need to read through every last bit of it, and you need to like actually sit back and think about it, because there's always going to be like instances which it intersects with other components of your game that you know about that the AI did not know about, and then you need to like wrap the code again to sort of clear that out. And it's just, if you want to use AI for game design, I think that prototype textures for games in like 3D games, 2D games, I think that's applicable. I think cleaning up, sort of spaghetti code, that can be done. And if you need just like to throw like somebody to throw ideas at and to like search for functions to go to do specific tasks, AI is really good for that. I have failed to find any useful function for it outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense to me, because I feel like AI is going to be in the same boat as, say, digital software stuff like Adobe, GIMP, Photoshop, things like that, where it's going to be a useful tool. It'll never be able to completely replace the human element there. Because I just don't, I think a lot of corporations, they want that, they see that. Maybe it'll happen in like 15 or so years, but I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're there in any imminent fashion. And for game design specifically, I don't see how you'll be able to justify, like you say, the time investment where you're spending all this time trying to develop the code, and then you have to always make sure you double check it for mistakes. Now, again, maybe it is more efficient at some point to just do that. But like, I definitely feel like you said, it's something where it's like, at some point you may as well just do it yourself.
Yeah. Also, actually, playtesting, AI can be used for that, and it can be used really well for that, because you could just say like, here are the parameters of this playtest, here's what you can do, and run this simulation 1 trillion different times. And if you ever fall out of bounds, flag that, and then you just, like, we're just looking for like collisions right now. So flag every out of bounds, we've mapped the out of bounds, and you just playtest through your entire map 1 trillion times. You like maybe run it for a couple of days to have those simulations run. And then you can just look at every single instance where it went out of bounds, and you can just tidy it up. Like that, AI can do. AI cannot give you interesting feedback on level design, though. I think AI has a lot of technical applications. I don't think it has any artistic applications.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think I think in that respect, I wonder how that's going to affect From Software as well, because Miyazaki's definitely been making, again, unlike like some of the developers we talked about, I think Miyazaki's done the smart thing where he's like say Bethesda or something. I think unlike Todd, Miyazaki has been smart enough to realize that with the way From Software is scaling up and he's taking a new position in the company, that doesn't let him be able to micromanage as the director for so many of the projects, that he's been trying to instead train up different talent while he still helms like the flagship stuff, so that way he can at least guarantee that they'll be able to survive up until the point where he feels like there will be well, not just be him, but there'll be a bunch of different talented directors that can be able to keep the company afloat even when he's not around there. I think that's definitely one of the problems that Todd has had, where if he's not there doing it, then he's done a poor job of making sure he trains somebody to replace him and be a good director in his place while he's doing everything else.
Was it you who I was talking to where I gave my my survival guide for Bethesda moving forwards?
We've talked about it
was
before.
That on
I don't know if it was a survival guide or not for that, but feel free to
my survival guide. my survival guide for Bethesda is that, because here's the thing. You don't have, like, Bethesda has like what, 1,000 staffers? You don't have 1,000 staffers without having some really talented people. Just numerically, there's a great number of talented people in there.
Right.
What Bethesda needs to do is sort of like shed its skin like a snake. And what needs to happen is that you need a really, really solid, talented designer. Maybe this is going to be Todd Howard. Maybe it's going to be somebody else. Maybe somebody younger. Maybe it's Todd Howard as like the wise old man, and he picks like somebody in the modding community or something. Just somebody really talented. And they identify and group together the best 15 people in the entire company. And then they start hiring the best in the modding space. And they build a new studio within Bethesda Studios, and they do the next Fallout. And they just, because they're a mean, lean team, they are going, and just of the highest quality people, they're going to make the greatest Fallout there has ever been. The role playing is going to be deeper than anything you can imagine. They're going to throw so much money into this. Like, okay, hey, Josh Sawyer and Chris Avallone, you just come back, write us some NPC stories. We're just going to really supercharge. It's kind of like we're going to build a Manhattan project within Bethesda, and then when they release their game, it's going to be incredible because it will work down by all these incredible people and under these incredible conditions. What we're going to do next is we're going to split the team in two. Todd Howard manages one, the younger guy who was being trained up manages the other, and now they have to pick staffers from the rest of Bethesda, and you're just sort of softly rebooting Bethesda, the studios within Bethesda.
And that's why they won't do it.
Yeah, that's why they won't do it. They're not going to do it. It's too interesting. It would be too much fun to watch. It would be too good of a sort of, it would be too good of a redemption arc. So it's not going to happen. But you'd love to see it happen.
I think the problem is, one, there's a huge bubble for Bethesda, and they don't know how to pop their bubble.
You could argue
Yeah,
they don't want
like
to pop their bubble. And I think there's also a secondary problem where Bethesda has gotten just so big and their development times have taken so long, they can't afford to have anyone leave in order to potentially hinder the current big project. So I think the problem is that they would feel like, okay, if we did identify all those talent, then whatever we're working on now that's like costing us so much money is not going to be able to make that money necessarily, right?
Then just build this new studio completely from the modding community. Just pick the best people in the modding community.
No, I agree.
Fly them out.
I agree with you. That would definitely be a solution, and that's why I don't think it's going to happen because you still have the bubble popping issue. And I think Bethesda is. I think
they have too
they're
much
just
money.
too far
That's
gone.
also a problem.
Like I have zero
They
faith
have
in Elder Scrolls 6. So
they're like those Gulf states where, because you have so much money, you didn't need to build a real like civic sector. You didn't need to build like real communities. You didn't need to like build a nation. And Bethesda, because they have so much money, they don't need to concern themselves with quality because they're always going to make money, and so they just sort of, when you don't have that sort of survival pressure breathing down your neck at all moments, it's really easy to be like, an 8 out of 10 is just as good as a 10 out of 10. They both make $1 billion.
Right.
That attitude is easy to develop.
There's also the problem of, because of the long lead times and things like that, you have so much development and innovation happening in genre spaces. By the time they get back to it, they don't realize how much has changed because of that bubble they're in, right? So it's like, no, we're living in a post Larian Studios, a post Witcher, like we're living in all these like post, like, hell, soon it's going to be post GTA 6, and then you're going to have Elder Scrolls 6 is now going to be compared to GTA 6 in terms of, role play, in terms of open world, in terms of, like, there's just the problem is just that, like, Bethesda has spent all their time remastering Skyrim and reselling it based on nostalgia value, and they did not focus on, like, okay, what is it that all these other studios and things are doing that we can try to compete and do better in. Instead they were like, well, we're Bethesda, we do our own, like, they're doing their thing, but we're doing our own thing, and our thing is perfectly great the way it is. It's like, no, it's not.
But like, it's also the other attitude they could have gone with is, okay, what are these other studios doing that we're not doing, and what are we doing that they're not doing?
Right.
And how can we more deeply embrace that makes us different, and like build on top of that for our own identity? But they don't do that. Their games have not gotten deeper. Their games have gotten simpler.
Right.
Their gameplay has gotten their programming has gotten much better, like enemy AI and stuff like that. But I mean, like, role playing and stuff like that.
But it's still behind, and that's the problem. Is that it feels like whenever Bethesda's making a step forward for every 2 steps or 5 steps back they make, the problem is that the step forward is always like a little tiny like step. It's not like a huge stride.
Do you remember? I think it was one of the Skyrim re-releases, or maybe it was the announcement for Fallout 4. It was some announcement they were making, and one of the selling points of the game was that it was going to have volumetric God ray lighting. So like when you walk through trees, the lighting is going to look really pretty. You're just looking at this like, what the hell do you think we play these games for, man? Like, I don't need, like, look, it's pretty. I'm not saying take it out, but this is not a selling point for anything.
Yeah, there's like 5 or 10 other things you could have been including. This was not the thing to be like putting front and center.
You could have been like, what you could have said? You could have said, like, maybe this was a re-release of Skyrim. Let's say it was. You could have said, instead of like emphasizing God rays, you could have said, we want to preserve this game for the new console generation because it was so successful. You players did so much for us as a studio by embracing it, and we've really put a lot of work in to try to deliver this experience as you remember it. Like, you could say that instead. You could say anything instead. Like, why like
you
it's
could
so
just wrap it
it's
up
like
and say better. You could say remastered, better graphics or something like that, right?
It's just such a like autistic like to really hone in on this one thing. It's like clearly somebody like really thought this was important to bring up. I think the one
thing they actually added in that remaster was like fishing or something. It's like something like really silly where it's like, oh, okay, like I'm so glad that like this is like the one big thing that you're adding as like the major change to the gameplay experience.
Oh, I'm so glad, Todd Howard, you played Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah.
Like, I actually saw on Twitter that he's replaying it now.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the problem, right? Is like
like why can't Todd and people at Bethesda look at all these other games that they're playing and be like, oh no, like we could do that and we could do more than that, even like we could push the boundary beyond just that. But they really, and part of it may be because they've relied so long on their engine, they just feel like, no, but like we have like the creation engine. It's like, okay, that's great, Todd, it's great for modding and stuff like that, but like it's kind of getting a little creaky. The bones are like, you know, they're about to snap.
And like to switch over now when you have 800 people working there, like you can't.
Yeah.
You have too many people on top of this creation engine. So what you would need is a new creation engine, or like a from the ground up overhaul of the entire thing.
Yeah.
And
again, that's
but
why,
like
that's
at the same time,
that's why again I think there's this problem where where Bethesda can't make these big radical changes they need to do so, because to actually right the ship right now, it just has so many other things that are relying on it, and they're just not willing to be able to take that extra time. I mean, I think you can see it in like Todd's interviews. Like, wasn't there something recently that came out where he's like, oh yeah, you know, Elder Scrolls 6, it's like, you know, we're not saying it's in pre-production still, but like, you know, it's basically in pre-production still, and don't worry, like,
yeah, it's like he was talking. I don't know if you're talking about the one I read, but I read him recently talking about how like production is going smoothly, and you know, we like to we like to take our time, and we, you know, nobody wants them out faster than we do, but we have to make sure they're good. And
we have
you know,
long pre-production times. And I'm like
we have long pre-production times, and our staffers are always working. They're always working on something. You know, that even if they're not working on Elder Scrolls 6, they're always working on something. And it's like,
that man is a master.
Todd, my man, you need to be in charge of a 30-person team now. Like, you need to stop with these bloated budgets and these runaway development times. Really just scale it way the hell back. Like,
it amazes me how, for all of its own problems, Obsidian has been able to pump out generally, I think, higher quality than Bethesda in less time. Like, I'm starting to say, like, wasn't Fallout New Vegas made in like 2 years or something?
Yeah, something ridiculous like that. And like, look, I haven't loved their most recent output. It's kind of hit and miss because they have.
I think they
apparently
suffered from.
Pentiment is really good.
Talent bleed, like we've talked.
Yeah. They've lost like people who want Obsidian to do the next Fallout. The Obsidian that made Fallout New Vegas doesn't exist.
Isn't
like
Tim
all of the
back
quality.
Now? Like, isn't he getting
Tim
back
Kaine?
into it?
Tim Kaine is back, working on something, but he didn't work on New Vegas. I think the only people the only major people who worked on New Vegas are Josh Sawyer and Fergus Urquhart. I think they're the only major people. Was Avalon on that
one as well, or?
Yeah, Avalon was on that one.
Yeah, he was for the
Red. And yeah, but like. I think like most of the quality team there doesn't work at Obsidian anymore.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with a lot of developers. This is why generally, like, historically, I've never really cared for developers. Like, I didn't know From Software did the Armored Core stuff until I think Rubicon got announced or whatever. I'm like, oh, so they're the ones who did that too, yeah. Like for me,
that was such a baller announcement, man. Do you remember?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, do you remember when the internet was hyped for Armored Core again, and I got 100,000 views in 2 days?
Yeah, and then we heard nothing about it. We're happy with it, and then they did nothing with it. They need to make a dedicated Armored Core team already. Like, I want my Armored Core Rubicon spin-off game, so before we hit the next main entry, come on, From Software, where is it? I
would be totally fine.
If Armored Core 5 came out today, I think it would be more successful. Like, unironically.
Ooh,
I think Armored Core 5 was ahead of its time.
I think in many ways it was, but the 5th generation of Armored Core is my least favorite generation.
Oh no, I agree with you. It has tons of problems, but I think generally, like, the idea of like an online, like, space, like kind of almost like MMO type idea. I think that I think that concept of what it had, I was like, man, I love this so much.
That was way ahead of its time.
Yeah, we're just not there yet. Like, now we are. Like, now in the world of hero shooters and stuff like that, yeah, you can do a non-MMO game that has these MMO elements for sure. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot of problems that was with 5, like, putting aside all that, but I definitely think that 5 would have actually been a moderate success if it had come out, like, even 5 years later, I think.
Yeah. I would love it if FromSoft just had, like, Yamamura lead a small team, and it's like, hey, you guys, you just do expansions to, like, you make Armored Core games. You're the Armored Core brands of this company, because they used to have what was his name? I made so many videos talking about this guy, and now I forget his name. The producer of the Armored Core series, Nagashima or whatever his name was.
just bring that back. And like he left the company when Miyazaki was made president. It's like really clearly bitter about not having been. And look, fair enough, he was there from the beginning, but like, bro, he made Demon's Souls, he made Dark Souls. Of course, he's going to be the president. Who do you think you are?
No,
but like, have Yamamura.
You're right, but I can understand being salty, right?
Oh, totally. But like, have Yamamura just direct the team of like, you make one Armored Core per generation as like a launch title, and then you just do expansions every couple of years.
Right.
And it's just like you and a small team, and like not massive expansions necessarily, like maybe just like, I don't know, a few hours of gameplay, maybe create more parts and like just build on top of the experience you gave us at the beginning. I would dip back into Armored Core 5 on an annual basis. Like I would buy every expansion. You kidding me?
I definitely feel like From Software has this problem with doing remasters and remakes of their games. I don't know if it's like a legal thing or something, but I definitely feel like they're in a weird spot where like this would be a great time for them to bring back all their old classics and stuff like that and look into the potential of expanding into creating like you know, a sub studio that's like dedicated to these types of remasters and remakes. Maybe take some of your guys who are like, you know, your best in your programming and have them do that on the side or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And maybe Miyazaki is gearing up for that as part of this whole I'm trying to build up director base and stuff, because I feel like at some point From Software has to accept they do need to expand in some spaces so they can handle all these things. But yeah, for sure, I agree with you. There's this issue where it's like it would be so great to see some of the older titles and things like that be coming out right now and being able to get some of the attention with some of the renewed popularity of both From Software as a brand and just Armored Core in general, and yet they're not doing it. Where's our Bloodborne PC release? Like, come on, like get together with Sony
like,
and figure this out.
As if like, hey, we like the Verdite trilogy, the original 3 Kingsfield games.
Yeah,
releasing all of them back, and it's just like we're gonna charge like $15-20 for it, whatever.
Right.
And these are PlayStation 1 games, so
OG
buyer
Demon's
beware.
Souls
But like.
even.
Yeah, but like even Kingsfield, that trilogy, as if that wouldn't sell enough to justify whatever it would cost to like produce that. Like what are you talking about? You would need to like, you would need to have somebody fetch the source codes for these games.
Listen, they have no excuse. They're about to re-release Elden Ring. Like they can find somewhere in their budget for that. Like with the profits they're going to be making.
Yeah.
Also, as Iman is wonderfully saying, why Dark Souls 5 Aldrich wouldn't improve? Listen, the Age of the Deep is gonna happen, Iman. Aldrich promised me, and I'm going to experience it. Okay, we're in our Age of Deep Seas now. Anyway,
I good man. So Loki and I, on the sly, we've been planning our own takeover of the Dark Souls license with Dark Souls 4. Which Loki's really hyped for.
Yep.
And
sure.
Artorias is gonna come back.
Yeah, I know. It's so
He's
novel
back.
and unique. It's like he's back from the dead, baby. The power of the abyss.
He's back.
Oh boy. Somehow Artorias returned.
What were some of the other ridiculous ideas we had for this? I had an idea for a Dark Souls, not necessarily Dark Souls, but like a game in that style, where geometry and time are linked together. So like you at the start of the game, you're at the beginning of the story. Right. At the end of the game, you're at the end of the story. But if you walk backwards, you are actually walking back in like the chronological happenings of the world. So you can like just walk in like loops of the world and like go through different time periods of it in that sort of interesting sense. And the main hub, which you would be able to access, would be like a clock. The interior of a giant like Big Ben clock, big gears and such, because it had to do with time. And Artorias was gonna come back.
So basically, and just make the Gundyr and the Giant Lord experience, but make a whole game about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Acer, man. Also, good to see you, Xavier. Wonderful to have you. TS4
Xavier.
Thrones, yeah. How do you feel about the big Dark Souls modding projects and things like that? Because I'm someone where it's like I don't really care for the Souls like ripoffs. You know, I don't really much care for the modding. You know, big mods or whatever they do for this. Like for me, I'm like, you know, I just want to play the official games and like that's what I want, right? Like again, I have nothing against these things, but like I'm kind of curious where you kind of stand in terms of how those shape up.
So it depends on the creator. What Ariane is doing with Demon's Souls and the Northern Limit, we've messaged back and forth on that one.
Right.
that's interesting to me. But when it's like, I'm gonna create like the hardest mode of these games, it's like, you know, that's not what I like about these games.
Yeah, I do.
In general,
here's
like,
the thing. I think difficulty is in fact an important discussion point and stuff like that. I do think one of the problems with the prepare to die type of marketing and things like that, you could argue this is another problem of why we need to cut marketing teams, is that they essentially make where the discussion is all about difficulty, when I think what's important is smart difficulty, where it's about making sure that you have the right stress points in an encounter in order to get something out of the experience, right? I think that's something that From Software is possibly starting to slip into, where like they're getting so focused on the idea of like, oh no, we need to make very technically exhausting, like excruciating boss battles, and those are great or whatever, but when your entire game is like, you can't make that like most of the game, because then what you have is this very huge problem where like you're essentially making it where like it just feels like boss encounter after boss encounter is just an exhausting gauntlet, and I feel like that can sometimes detract from the Elden Ring experience, and I definitely think it's a problem that could end up coming back in the future.
Totally. I just I recently replayed Demon Souls, and my God, like that game is so much more tense than Elden Ring, but every encounter is so much easier than Elden Ring's. But yeah, so another thing I'd like to talk about, because you were talking about like Souls-likes and such, is that so what is a Souls-like? Because to me, when people talk about Souls-likes, and like, do you like Souls-likes? Logi, do you like Souls-likes? Do you effing like Souls-like?
No, I'll be honest. I don't even. Personally, I'm not like crazy about that as a genre name itself. Honestly,
no.
And that's the thing. But that's the problem I have with it.
The thing about me, Loki, is that I don't like Souls-likes. I like From Software games.
Right.
But like, you take those exact same mechanics and you have somebody else make games with them. Oh, it's very hit and miss. You know, I don't like first-person shooters. I liked BioShock, but I don't like, that doesn't mean I'm gonna like every first-person shooter.
Right.
And, you know, what is a genre? Is it just like boss run backs? Is it just like difficulty? Is it third-person combat? I mean, gosh,
this
Loki,
become a problem.
Kingsfield,
a Souls-like
Kingsfield
has
4,
anything that's like Dark Soul, anything that has like 2 or 3 elements that you could find in Dark Souls, which you could basically boil down to
but like,
checkpoints,
to me,
combat, and exploration.
To me, Kingsfield 4 is much more of a Souls-like than like Lies of P is, even though Lies of P ostensibly is built to like mimic Souls-like. It's just the ambience is not there, whereas the ambience of like the sentiment of the work is what has to speak to me. Well, and when I think of what I like about the Souls games, I'm not thinking about just raw gameplay.
Yeah, I think From Software has such a unique stranglehold in terms of atmosphere that is incredibly difficult for any other developer to capture that. So I think Lies of P is deserving to be like the first like good Souls-like, right? Where it seems to be where like,
oh, I liked it.
Oh no, for sure. But I think that's the one where like, as someone who myself, where I was like, you know, I think I'm gonna skip this one. I'm not really that crazy. I can respect and understand it as being like, okay, it's a game that's trying to tell its own story, do its own thing, but it's able to take a lot of this, the same mechanics and trappings of the From Software Miyazaki library and be able to build upon that in a way that's able to feel like it matches it in terms of a technical quality. And I think that much is very true. But I think when it comes to, like you say, the complete package, like there's just From Software. There's nothing else. There's games that try to imitate it. There's games that try to do a completely wild thing, like they'll go in a sci-fi direction or something. But you can't do From Software because the talent at From Software very clearly is like, it's not replicable. It's very obvious there. And I think that's a huge problem.
And also, like, I'm a fan of From Software, and even if you did a game that was like just as good as them in the exact same style, like, I don't know, man. Like, I like Miyazaki. Like, if you have the talent to make a game in their style, perfectly attuned to their sentiment, wouldn't you rather make your own game?
Well, that's why I think Lies of P succeeds a lot, because it doesn't try to it tries to borrow the gameplay elements, but it tries to go its own direction with like kind of like aping Pinocchio and making references to other aspects of the you know, the larger like literature mythos and things like that, and try to take all that to tell like a unique inspired world where it's like, okay, like we're aping a lot of the Pinocchio aesthetic and the Pinocchio things that you're familiar with from the various media, including Disney and stuff, but we're actually like doing it to kind of tell our own world and story, and then like from what I understand, they're trying to build a franchise off that, which I'm like, yeah, I think that's great. I think this Korean studio's like kind of figured it out where they're like, yeah, there's the gameplay skeleton there, but we're going to at least try to go in a different direction, because if we try to make it like completely like the Dark Souls experience, if we try to capture that same atmosphere and tone and same exact type of story that From Software goes for, I think they would have crashed and burned. Instead, they tried to take that gameplay skeleton and fit it within their own narrative ideas that they had, and I think that worked so much better for them, and is why it was able to succeed, I think, where many others stumble. Because like you talked about Lords of the Fallen or whatever, and I'm like, Lords of the Fallen is kind of like what I think of like a generic like copycat of like, oh, I'm trying to be the next Dark Souls, right? And again, that's not a you know, that's not like, you know, trying to me like poo-poo the developers or whatever, if that's what they want to make or something like that, but like that's just like my mental image as a customer, what I'm thinking of, being like, oh, this is like a knockoff of Dark Souls, right? So whatever like merits or like unique little ideas they may have in there, it just feels like it's not radically different enough from you know, from like Dark Souls for me to be able to like judge it as its own work, instead of making it constantly a comparison where it's always going to be inferior than the Dark Souls in my brain because I love Dark Souls, right? So like it's I think a lot of developers kind of put themselves in a very awkward position that way.
Yeah.
BB is not a Souls game, it's an action game. I'll be honest, for me, I cut off the like quote unquote Souls games when it comes to From Software's library at Sekiro. I'm like, yeah, they're like, once you like completely change the action combat and things like that, like at this point it's like what really makes it like Dark Souls or anything, because it has a checkpoint system or something. Like at this point, like I think like everything from it's the way you traverse it to the way you do everything like that. I think Bloodborne by comparison, it still very much keeps to the core of the combat with a little twist of being like, oh, you have two modes to your weapons now, right? I feel like and like obviously you have the regenerative health and stuff like that, but I think that's too much in the same vein of what like Dark Souls does, that it feel like it just kind of, it's one of those things where like it feels like it's the same, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Sekiro I think is its own thing, but also like I could just group it with the Souls likes, and it's like, yeah, it's whatever.
Mm-hmm. I think that's another problem. It's like it became like, when Souls was just Souls, it made sense. Then they got Bloodborne and they started calling it Soulsborne. Now we're adding Sekiro. Now we have Elden Ring. Like at some point, like we just kind of have to accept that From Software, it's kind of like, no, this is just like the From Software Miyazaki RPG. And I think Souls has become the new, like people have just accepted to calling it kind of like Souls-like, in the same way that we have like roguelites and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of like just the default people have gone to, because they're like, yeah, at some point, like there's so many different games and so many different franchises that From Software is pioneering with this like genre, as we're calling it, right? But really, it's just not really its own genre. It's more like a subgenre in like the action RPG, right? Which is itself a subgenre of RPG. So it's like, and what even is an RPG anymore? Which I think is like the real like underlying question at this point.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what you said earlier about genres and like what constitutes genres anymore.
Totally. They need to hurry up announcing their next game that isn't like a PvE. I like Night Rain. Duskbloods looks fun. I'm not gonna play it because I don't own a Nintendo Switch.
You cannot convince me to get a Switch 2 or whatever it is to play Duskbloods. Like I'm like, wow, it looks cool. Like I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. Like this is really cool. And then I saw like, oh, Nintendo Switch 2. Okay, absolutely lost all. Like I have never gotten so flaccid over a game so fast. It was like, wow, you just like killed all my excitement. Like it just kind of completely deflated.
My Nintendo Switch, the one I bought, I played Breath of the Wild, I played Shovel Knight, Spectre of Torment, and that's it. I played basically 2 games on it. I played Yooka-Laylee a bit, but I didn't fall in love with it. So it's like, you know, this was a waste of a purchase, and you know, you know what the thing is? I like Nintendo, I respect Nintendo. I'm not a Nintendo gamer.
Neither am I. Again, there are. I think the last time I played a Nintendo game outside of Smash Brothers, I think was probably, well, I guess Dead Space Extraction would probably be the tech one. But like most of my Nintendo games, I'm like, yeah, I really loved and enjoyed stuff was back on the GameCube days. I definitely feel like a point where they are becoming one, they're really tapping into like the Western side of the media ecosystem, and I think that's going to be for the negative. And I think also some of their litigation tactics have been not to their benefit overall in terms of reputation. And I think when you combine,
you mean like when they copyrighted my video on Majora's Mask?
yeah, and I think when you combine that with their where they're generally seeming to start coasting on their franchises, I do worry we're going to hit a point where Nintendo, like in maybe a decade or so, is just going to start crashing and burning like we've seen with some of these other studios. But granted, I think Nintendo has been a lot more like they've been a lot more like conscious about like, you know, their image and what they're doing and everything in their business overall. So I do think that they can, like, you know, course correct a lot easier than most others, because they've definitely done it before. But like, I don't know, I guess we're just gonna have to see or what have you, right? I'll be playing, are you talking about Lords of the Fallen? Oh no, Dustbloods, yeah.
I think he's talking about Dustbloods.
Yeah. Also, I disagree about Lords of the Fallen. Lords of the Fallen 2023 is pro-siding with Lords of the Fallen 2014. People don't get that. Lords of the Fallen has its mood too. Again, I agree with you, Ivan. I'm sure the game has lots of its own thing, like it's trying to do so. The problem is, it's very clearly that it was a game where it was like, okay, we're gonna try to. It's very clear it was a game that was very much heavily inspired by what Dark Souls was originally doing, and then trying to work from there, being like, how do we differentiate ourselves from Dark Souls? I think that's the wrong way to approach it, because you are, for like, merited or not, you are creating in the mind of the customer now this this subconscious comparison to Dark Souls in everything you do. And I think that is the underlying problem there, is that like Lords of the Fallen, it could be something where it's like, yeah, you go through the whole thing and it definitely ends up on the whole being its own experience, but it's like, it's a bunch of subtle nuanced things that is not going to convince a lot of people to go through and sit through that entire experience, for what they're going to feel is going to be ultimately inferior. Because they're going to be like, this is not Dark Souls. And I think this is what I've said about DS2 in the past, right? Like, it's like, for all my criticism of DS2, I think a lot of DS2's problems would have been solved if it wasn't a Dark Souls game. Like, it's like, okay, it's its own thing. You like it, you hate it. It's like, it's on its own, and you judge it as like its own part. Like, if it was like, I don't know, Dusk Blood Souls the second or something like that, it was like its own new franchise or whatever, right? I think the controversies about it would have been, at the very least, very much isolated, where it would not have become so toxic for within the Souls community specifically. It would have been like, okay, maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but it's its own thing. Because we clearly see with Bloodborne that you could have a success case where like it's its own franchise, and you know, maybe you don't like how Bloodborne plays, maybe you do. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's its own thing, so all its positives will only help the company, and all of its negatives you'd be like, well, you know, it's kind of its own separate thing. Maybe you just don't like that game. You know, there's plenty of others in From Software's library you can still enjoy, or in there, you know, that's like this, right? Same thing with Elden Ring, right? Like, maybe you don't like open world Dark Souls or whatever, like, but you still have Dark Souls, you still have Bloodborne, you still have Demon Souls, right? And that's where I feel like expectations are as important in gameplay, because again, this goes back to what we're talking about with marketing. You don't need a big marketing team to be able to sell you your game. You just need to be able to sell the game, and that's very easy in today's market. You just have to set the expectations for it.
Yeah. Are you gonna watch One Piece?
No. Though I hear they're doing a remake or something of it, or they're gonna start. They're gonna start. I think they're also like doing it where they're like, oh my god, My Hero Academia and like all these other shonen, they're like just doing like a really high quality season, and then they're like stopping for a little bit to give people a breather, and then they're coming back with another high quality season, and it's like no filler and stuff. Wow, maybe we should do that.
Yeah, and also like the Toei one is going like seasonal now instead of being like every week. But yeah, Wit Studios is doing like just a brand new adaptation, and
Wit's doing
it's gonna follow. Yeah, and it's gonna follow the pace of the manga. And it's just gonna be like, oh yeah, awesome! I can just get through this in 20 episodes instead of 140 episodes.
Honestly, I might, you know what? If it's a really good adaptation, I might give it a shot. I don't know how I feel about Wit doing it, though. I feel like I would prefer if Wit would keep doing, like, you know, their own thing instead of, like, falling into the Bones trap where you're stuck doing this, like, shonen adaptation with all your staff for God knows how long. Bones, do a remake of Noragami, you assholes!
I really hope they get, like, a complete shuffle of talent. Like, don't bring in the original One Piece voice actors. Do it like recast everybody.
That's gonna be controversial, especially in Japan.
I don't care.
Yeah,
the Japanese can suck it.
Well, no, I agree with you. And I think it's possible because I think there is a cultural change where it used to be where
Luffy's voice
don't do
actress,
that.
she's like 70.
No, I understand what you're saying, but the thing is, like, you don't change VAs. Like, this was one of the big controversies with Goku, where like Goku's kid VA ends up doing adult Goku, and I personally don't like it. But like, there's no denying that she's a really prolific and well-loved VA because, in part, of what she's done with Goku over the years. And I think the idea of replacing her would be like, you know, it'd be heresy. And I think that's something that, you know, like that's going to be difficult to sell, I think. But I think it might be easier to sell now if they were to do it. So like, yeah, maybe they just gotta bite the bullet and be like, we're gonna do this. I saw this in the Trails remake. They ended up basically recasting most of the JP people. And to be fair, it's mostly because Falcom's like a penny pincher when it comes to their budgets and stuff like that. So they probably were like, you know, all the VAs like we hired like 20 years ago, they're great and all, but like they're more expensive now too because they're more high profile. So
what has Wit Studios done?
They've done stuff like Attack on Titan and things like that. You know, they also
they did Attack on Titan.
Yeah. So like they're known for they've done some original stuff, but they've generally been known for like generally being just high quality overall. And like I generally like the idea that they do high quality limited like you know some of the lesser size shows, right? Like there's some studios where I'm like Toei Animation, like they're always going to be doing. I'm always going to know them for doing like the big long running shonens and stuff like Dragon Ball or something like that, because like that's just kind of like what they've been doing or something, or like One Piece or something like that, right? Like because that's just like kind of what they've been doing. But then you got like your UFA tables or something where it's like, you know, you try to focus on making like really high quality like limited types of shows like your Demon Slayer or something, where Demon Slayer, yeah, it's technically a long running shonen, but it's a lot shorter than you'd expect, right? Like they're very close to like finishing up, I think, with like their film releases they're doing too now. So like stuff like that. And then you got like is
that another thing that's changing in Japanese anime manga? Because like Demon Slayer, that's done. I feel like manga used to just kind of run forever, but maybe that's just because I don't know much about manga.
Okay,
but like,
so this is true in many cases. And there's several factors that at least to my understanding is affecting this. One is just the fact that there have been a lot more high profile deaths of manga artists and things. Which I think, especially like, you know, like with Berserk, especially, right? Like you like when you have like some of these creators or something who like are kind of like mainstays in your industry, and like these are people who are essentially like the headline is they're dying of overwork. There's just a lot of questions coming in of being like, yes, there are manga artists and like the fairy tales mangakas like this, like where these are just people where like they live to work, like their entire thing is day in and day out. They go in and they just keep drawing and drawing. And you're like, how the hell do they have time to do anything else except draw? Yet somehow like their schedules, they make it work, and it is absolutely insane to look at their work ethic. And that's
Logie, I gotta step away from the microphone for 1 minute. But I still have you on my headset, so just keep going.
Gotcha. So like they can hear like, you know, they can hear about all of these like, you know, issues that are happening, and I feel that's a huge contributor to people like being like, you know, like maybe we should be like, you know, taking breaks, or, you know, don't want to go oversell it. I think there's been a lot more lax on being like, okay, mangaka, it's okay, you could take a week or two off in order to deal with your health, or like you could take like a month or something, or whatever it needs to be, because what's most important is your health. The franchise is still going to be there, and you're still going to have an audience. Now, there's an argument that can like backfire if you're like someone who's going to be like out of the game for years, at which point it's like, man, like what's the point anymore if like, you know, you're not going to be around for so long that by that point there's like several new generations that have come by that know nothing about your work. But hey, maybe there's potential there. That's something that you could potentially market to a whole new audience, your old stuff. But I think there's just a lot of concern recently about the Japanese work ethic culture. And again, I don't think they're like relenting on it so much, but I do feel like at least in the entertainment space, there's a lot more like, you know, awareness about like, you know, making sure that the mental and physical health of the artists is kept up, because you can't make money off a franchise if the author ends up dropping dead because of overwork and stuff like that. So sustainability, I think, is a lot more important now. And I think another thing that's been changing is I think overall there's just this understanding that you don't you don't need to syndicate on TV anymore. It's no longer this thing where it's like you need to make sure you have an episode airing every single week continuously with little to no breaks. Because there's going to be like Golden Week or some holiday or something where maybe they're not going to air something or whatever, right? But like generally speaking, I think there's no longer this need to be able to do it because you have streaming and like this kind of new brand of seasonal television, which I think you see with like I said, My Hero Academia. They took a long-running shonen. They could have made it where Bones was trying to crank out an episode every week, no matter what. Like that was like going to be the work ethic. And some episodes they're gonna have to cut the budget on because they're gonna have to cheapen out on that. They're gonna have to stretch out this like scene or sequence of the manga where they're gonna have to add a filler arc here or there. And generally, Bones just said, no, we're going to adapt it, and we are going to take a break once we are done adapting this section of the story, so that way we can take the time to give us our Bones quality to that story. I think you see Ufotable do a similar thing when they handled Demon Slayer. I think all of that kind of together makes it where like the anime adaptations of manga and light novels and things like that aren't becoming anything where like, okay, we have to be able, like you still see it sometimes. There's sometimes this, oh, we're gonna greenlight like 50 episodes of like this big franchise or whatever, and we're just gonna kind of like, it's gonna be a little bit lower production quality and stuff. Like they did that with like Yozakura Family. They've done that with series in the past and things like that. But I think overall, like the industry is moving towards a more, I don't know if you want to call it like healthier necessarily, but something where it's like, okay, we are going to try to emphasize having quality and sustainability over this ability to be able to frequently crank out content, so we're always there, because you don't need to. Again, you have, like we said, we have social media and stuff. You can keep things in the conversation a lot longer by using social media, by using merchandising through online advertisements and things like that, in order to have it where people are still thinking about it. You don't need it where it becomes this regular routine for you to watch your like your 9 o'clock TV show or something like on the on an anime channel or something, right? So I think overall, I think that the anime industry is shifting, and I think it's shifting in big ways where, like you say, now you're seeing One Piece be able to start being like, hey, we should do things this way. Why are we doing things the old way? And I think one of the problems is that Japan is like, Japan can sometimes be slow to adapt to these types of things, so it takes them a while to be able to kind of like jump on it. But now that a bunch of the studios have, and like years have shown that it definitely works out, I think a lot of studios are just like, yeah, this is just better. We should be doing things this way. Why are we doing things the old way? It's just not needed.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah, but like Wit have done like Attack on Titan is perhaps what they've been most known for. They did Cabaneri a while back. Seraph at the End was another one. I think they did Vinland Saga, and I'm pretty sure they're for Spy Family, though I haven't been able to see Spy Family yet. So no, was that a Clover production? I don't remember. Anyway, they do a bunch of stuff. I think they did the new Suicide Squad and things like that. So like
I think they call it Spy X Family.
The X is silent. No. The X is always silent. This is. It's not Triple X Holic, it's Holic. It's the same thing. It's Spy Family, it's Hunter. All of you freaking gaijins don't know what you're doing.
Is that like sexy in Japan? If I were to roll into Japan and I'd be like, hola, Kimosabe, and I would just like totally gaijin it up, would that be sexy, or would I be looked at scornfully?
From what I understand, actually, foreign language proficiency in Japan has been going down dramatically. I'm not sure the exact cause. I'm not sure if it's like due to educational law changes or something, or if it's like some bigger cultural change. But younger generations are they don't know, they're not learning English.
What?
Yeah, they're not.
These outrageous Japanese children.
Yeah, so like I think people meme the English too hard. They're just not learning it anymore. They're like, we don't care.
The English.
Yeah.
There's always rumors of a Yu-Gi-Oh anime redux where they're just gonna modernize the duels and like do the stories again.
Right.
I don't know, man. I don't wanna watch that. I wanna watch it as it was made.
Well, okay, so my thing with Yu-Gi-Oh is I feel like, well, one, I don't like how they did the most recent. I don't know if they've changed back or whatever, but they changed the art style significantly from like the Takahashi look that it's like you look at that, you're like, that's Yu-Gi-Oh, right? So I don't like that they did that, and I don't like how. Oh, so I want to go around there, that side. Gotcha. Anyway, I also don't like how they've basically made it where, like the storytelling hasn't really improved with the different seasons or what have you, right? And you can say, well, oh, they're always limited by card games or whatever, but it's like you look at like the original Yu-Gi-Oh, they were games that were able to be really dark and really twisted in some ways. I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh decided like it wasn't going to go in the Digimon direction, it was going to go in the Pokemon direction, and it hasn't really worked out for it that well. Or I'm like, no, Yu-Gi-Oh always has like a dark edge to it, and you kind of need to
Yu-Gi-Oh
preserve
Yu-Gi-Oh is only good. Yu-Gi-Oh is only good when it has that dark edge.
Yeah.
So like the original Yu-Gi-Oh is about like dual identities and like the unintegrated shadow that lurks within all men, and like this conflict is represented with these characters, and like it's all conveyed in just like card games, but it's all there.
Right.
And
it also benefits from using like ancient Egyptian motifs, which is, that's not something that's been overused that much. Like now everything's in vogue. It's Nordic, right? Like everything has to be Nordic.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was something where it was like, okay, for a while they weren't doing like Vikings or whatever, and I was like all for it. Now it's like even Elden Ring, like it tries to ape a little bit of that Nordic aesthetic and stuff like that with like, your Valkyries and Melania and all that stuff, right? Like, so that's become like kind of like the trendy thing. While Yu-Gi-Oh was like, you don't never see it where it's like, oh yeah, ancient Egypt is the thing. Like maybe when the Mummy was coming out in that franchise, kind of, but like it never became like this really widely universal thing. It was always like the Greeks or whatever, right? And now it's the Nordic the ancient Norse pantheon, and then eventually I'm sure they'll maybe get around to doing ancient Egypt. But for now, at least, like they're kind of like over the whole Egypt thing because they can't mine it for mummy movies anymore.
I feel like Egyptian mythology is always going to be like on the fringe. I don't think Egyptian mythology has mass appeal. I think that they're gonna do a God of War set. I think they'll do a God of War set in Egypt. People will play it and they'll be like, can we go back to the Nordic ones?
Really, I personally, I've always really loved it, but that could just be my bias talking. Like it's always been.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying I don't think it has mass appeal.
No, I agree with
because
you. That's
I
what I'm
think
saying. I could be biased there. I've always felt like it's something that I've always been
I
personally
think it is
attached to.
I think that this is such an old religion, and this religion sort of sprung up around a certain way of living for a different kind of people. I think modern man is incapable of comprehending why like many of these gods would have been necessary. Whereas you go to like the Greek pantheon, and like modern scholars have done a great job of like Dionysus, and like they've brought them back and like reinterpreted them in like opera and like analyses where you like go into the psychology of these gods, and like you explore the Iliad. It's like
for sure.
The Iliad is just this cumulative problem of men not accepting just compensation when it was offered, and it's just like civilization breaks down because everybody stops treating it properly. And like Achilles, when he finally relents and accepts Agamemnon's forgiveness and returns Hector's corpse, the goddess, she comes and she gives him a shield of like people sitting down at a table and writing contracts, and it's just like, oh, the Iliad is just a way to build civilization. That's like the sort of mimetic value of this. Like a modern man can sit down with Greek mythology, he can sit down with Nordic mythology, and he can get it. But I think ancient Egypt is too far removed. It's kind of like the Babylonians or the Sumerians. It's too far back.
I could see that. I do think I would take exception to that only so far as I feel like you have some franchises like Fate and like we said with Yu-Gi-Oh that are able to properly incorporate. Though even with Yu-Gi-Oh we have to acknowledge that they got very liberal in terms of how they incorporate the mythology itself. But I think in terms of like aesthetics and stuff, I think it's rife with potential.
Oh, yeah. Aesthetics. They've got good aesthetics.
Yeah. So I definitely feel like there's definitely something in the future where we could see more like Egyptian-inspired like mythos and peoples and stuff. Plus, it's a good excuse to be like, oh yeah, like we can have all our characters be half naked. It would totally make sense for the culture.
She's 600 years old, guys. Oh my god.
No, but like the overall, I feel like
you can have cat girls. You can have cat girls.
Yes, you're right. Legit cat girls. Cat girls of all kinds. You like your more furry kind? You like the ones with just the ears? Like we got all sorts of cat girls just for you.
You want a woman with a cat's head? No?
What about an Anubis thing?
And what? You want like a dog guy?
Dog, jackal.
You want like an alligator? You want like an alligator man?
Listen, the Scalies exist. I'm sure they will be thrilled.
Scalies, that's what they would call themselves, isn't it? Logi, every now and then, I remember that the internet is a thing, and I'm like, damn, some of you people didn't need to go here. Some of you people should have been safeguarded, but it's too late for you now.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I'm saying, man. Digimon is definitely darker than Pokemon. Like, Digimon has always dealt with very dark themes. I feel like, yeah, Pokemon's that series where it kind of flirted with it initially, and it very quickly kind of figured out, like, no, we're not going to be that franchise. And yeah, it's mostly worked out for them, but I think it's also caused stagnation.
Kegare.
Yeah, there's a lot of corruption there in Pokemon, isn't there? A lot of Kegare at this point.
I think Yu-Gi-Oh! GX also has a great deal of depth. Most of it comes just through really good character work.
Oh, I would agree.
But it gets really contemplative in the 3rd and 4th season.
Oh, I agree. I feel like
Yu-Gi-Oh!
GX
5Ds is also great.
I think the problem with GX was it took too long in order to gear up to that. Like, it should have already had in mind how it was going to get to like that type of stuff earlier. And
yeah,
5Ds is weird where like I like it a lot. I just don't know how I feel about them going with the motorcycle gimmick. Like, it's kind of one of those things where it kind of feels like
this is so cool.
No, yeah, that's the thing. It's like I feel like that's something executive like, oh yeah, the kids will love it. So like, you know, it's like that biker gang like follow coolness that like, you know, execs like in the 80s and 90s were all about trying to ape for a while. I feel like that's kind of like what Japan went through with that moment where they were like, okay, we're gonna try to do like card games, but it's on motorcycles, isn't it so awesome?
What was in vogue at the time that they were like, yeah, motorcycles? Was he just like, did he just watch Akira and was like, I know what I'll do?
Maybe, I don't know. I have to go back and check because yeah, and then like it's one of those things where like again, I feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the problem where like it feels like it takes away more and more of its dark themes with each iteration, and then like obviously there's always the censorship and stuff, but we're not talking about that for the localizations overseas. I just feel like it's one of those franchises where like it sort of tries to make itself more and more child friendly, where it's like no, you should be leaning more and more into like the dark, twisted, and screwed up parts, because that's what made Yu-Gi-Oh! Really good, is like all the stuff with like Pegasus and his wife and like stealing freaking, you know, people into other souls into other dimensions and things like that, and like outright like killing people and these like death game type of things. Like this was something that like made Yu-Gi-Oh! Like a lot more interesting, I feel like, with the narrative stakes. And like, you know, Skybo, where he's literally gonna like step over a cliff edge and make it so that way like if you try to beat him, the hologram technology is going to possibly blow him away. Like there's all these things that were like you were able to do creative stuff beyond just the card game while still being able to incorporate it in the context of the card game. And I think as they began to like shave off those edges and it was just the card game now, it ended up being where it's like, okay, well we're not really able to tell compelling like card game stories within the context of this, and we can't really tell too much that's like too interesting outside of that. So like
yeah, like I think only DM, the original run of Yu-Gi-Oh, really had those sorts of deep card games. Most of the drama and the depth of subsequent, like in the duels, and then like there are great duels and like great deep moments in subsequent seasons, but like most of the character stuff there is happening around the card game, but the card game doesn't like. So like when Yugi is in the ceremonial duel against Yami or against the Tem,
yeah.
Yugi activates the Millennium Box and he places a card in the Millennium Box. And if Yami ever plays that card during the duel, he doesn't know what card it is, then that card will be deactivated. And there comes a point in the duel where Yami, and he has like the superpower to draw whatever card he wants.
Right.
That's the power of the Millennium Puzzle.
Right.
He draws a card. And he activates it, and it's Monster Reborn, and he brings back Slifer the Sky Dragon to go in for an OTK, and then Yugi reveals that was the card he put in the box, and the Monster Reborn is denied. And it's like, Yugi, like this duel is about, like this is the battle of souls, because Yami has to be defeated before he can be allowed to ascend to become the king of the afterlife.
Right, it's resurrection.
And he, like yeah, it's resurrection, and the last card he played is resurrection, and it's like, no, you're going away. Yeah, and he's like crying, and it's so powerful.
Yeah, and
my god.
In the OG, you have to also remember, Monster Reborn used an Ankh, and they censored it in the OG.
An Ankh, yes.
Yeah. So it's actually using the symbol of life in Egypt and stuff like that. So like it's very poetic, and like that type of stuff. That type of stuff is, I feel like we said with like Digimon and stuff like that. You're not seeing that in some of those franchises and what have you. And I think that's always a sad, because it's like you don't have to kidify things to make things for kids, if that makes sense, right?
They even reused that gimmick in the in the Yu-Gi-Oh movie, the last Yu-Gi-Oh that Takahashi worked on. Yugi uses exchange, I believe, against Kaiba. So, and Kaiba's trying to desperately revive the Pharaoh to have his final duel with him. And he uses exchange, and they like swap one card from their hands. Kaiba grabs Monster Reborn, and he places it face down at one point, just as like bait, because he can't play anything. And then when Yugi is about to beat him, Kaiba's just like smirking, and he has nothing. He has Monster Reborn face down, but he can't do anything. And he's just like sort of accepting that I can't bring him back. But then at the end, he has like a travel to the afterlife, which is like totally weird and contradicts the entire point of that duel. But you know, whatever.
Well, you can make an argument that it's thematically serving as kind of like I'm letting you go, right? It's that final meeting where it's like I'm confronting the.
Yeah, but he didn't. He travels to the afterlife later on and has his final duel with the Pharaoh.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Then that's obviously kind of steps on. Like it would be one of those things where I would definitely. I don't know. Kaiba's such a fascinating character for Yu-Gi-Oh! Like it's such a shame.
Kaiba is such a great character, man.
It's one of those. It's one. I feel. Again. So I feel like when it comes to I think when it comes to like anime assholes, like you have to be able to have it where you have a character where like this character is an asshole, but they're not necessarily wrong, right? Like there's someone where it's like you can very much understand and logically agree with what a character is doing or acting and how they're handling it, even if they're being a dick about it. And I think that's kind of the trick with those types of characters, right? Because it's something where it's like you can't really like it's like I don't like it, but I can't really argue with you about it either, right? And I think that's kind of the line that's Kaiba's able to draw, where like he can be just an absolute asshole to everybody, but you're like, yeah, but he's also the guy that's got the fuck you money. So like, he's the guy, like he's the guy who like makes the big bucks. Like you can't really.
He's also he has two things going for himself in his personality that I love in any character. Number one, he's incredibly competent, and number two, he's very deeply obsessed about something.
Right.
You know, I love that. Like, he's very driven. It's like, did you watch The Great Mouse Detective? I love that movie. Yeah. It's one of my favorite movies. It's just like this
with Basil.
You know, it's just Sherlock. It's just like Basil and what's it called, Radagon or whatever.
Yeah.
Radagon. And
no, Radagon. Yeah.
Radagon. No, and it's just like this battle of these two monstrous egos, and I love it.
Now I imagine the clock tower, but it's Radagon's boss thing.
But yeah, so like I think Kaiba, of all like the anime sort of anti-heroes, you know, your Vegetas and such, I think Kaiba is the best one.
I definitely agree. I like Vegeta. I think the problem is that Vegeta exists within the context of Dragon Ball, and Dragon Ball is very hit or miss for me. And I think the fact that the series is like kept going has kind of made it hit miss more than it's hit over time. It's one of those franchises where it's like you could tell that its popularity kind of like got in its own way, because like it could have kind of just like ended after Frieza, or you can even argue after Cell, but like it just kept going and just kept going and just kept going.
It's also and it's like I saw a video of like so there's a sequence where Vegeta becomes evil again because of the booze. I haven't seen Dragon Ball, so I don't know. He becomes evil because of the booze, and then he has like a moment where he's like reconciling with his son and his wife, and he's like, you know what, I, the proud prince of the Saiyans, I'm gonna stand up for Earth, for my son, for my wife, and yes, Goku, even for you, I will do this. And he has like a final shot where he sacrifices himself to take down the big bad, and it didn't. Apparently, it doesn't do anything. He does absolutely no damage or something, and it's just like, you know, I feel like there's a grasp of storytelling that is being underserved by the need to print weekly Shonen Jump manga.
I think one of the things that has helped Shonen Jump, especially recently, is that because they've pretty much maxed out their male demographic audience, you know, the actual shonen audience, they've now been trying to get into the shoujo audience a lot. So they've been really trying to expand
the Jump audience.
Well, you know, I guess they're trying to jump over to also getting some of the girlies into their stuff like that. And I think that's basically been very good, because I think one problem with shonen manga that's been a huge issue is the fact that they have very much neglected their emotional core, especially with like romance and stuff like that. Like it's almost like it's almost a meme about how much like with Goku, like his marriage to Chi-Chi is just like all banners of just like, how the hell have you guys stayed together with just all the bullshit with Goku and all that stuff. Like, it is like they play it for laughs, right? And that's how I think Toriyama is able to make it work, a lot of that. But it's like one of those things where it's like it is so often neglected, where to the point that I think in the more, I think it was like in Super or something, where they made the joke where somehow Goku doesn't know what sex is. And it's like, but you have like 3 kids. So like, it's like, how the hell did Chi-Chi do this? It's bad. Like, it's just one of those things where like at some point it gets flanderized to the point where like you need like you need characters that are like well-rounded enough where like, yes, they're the action people, yes, they're always trying to do that, but like the whole premise of like, you know, the story of the knight and the action hero is like, you know, he performs all his actions in order to do the ultimate good and is rewarded ultimately with things like romance and stuff like that for his efforts of becoming like the better, nobler, stronger person, right? And like it's sort of like supposed to be like, you know, it's the thematic consequence of your personal, moral, and physical development, right? And I think, well, that's been so often neglected, but with Shonen Jump, they've been smart enough to be like, okay, we need to now get into the girly side, so we need to focus more on having not just protagonists that are cool, like action heavy, strong, you know, maybe tragic, and like they have like some like you know, relatable traits or something like that, but they're still like a hero at heart or something like that, and they're like flaws or something they'll overcome, right? They also need to be people who are also considering being in touch with like, you know, the people and the men and women of their lives. It's not just gonna be about the bromance, it's also gonna be about the romance. And I think that has been something that's benefited a lot, because we've gotten so, like I mentioned Yozakura Family earlier, I think there's just been a lot of really great series that have been able to come out from Shonen Jump recently, because they've been like, okay, we're gonna not just do action series with a bit of romance, we'll just do straight up like romance, like Blue Box or something like that. Yeah. And it's just,
and like, you know, when you talk about like shonen, or maybe like I suppose Berserk is a seinen, right?
Seinen,
but
yeah.
Seinen, yeah. But like Miura described Berserk once as it's a blend of Fist of the North Star and Rose of the Versailles. Like he wanted to merge boy manga and women manga together.
Right. You definitely see it in some of the sequences of Berserk for sure. But like I think that was very prescient on his part, because that is in fact something where like the work is like Berserk is a classic because it's not just trying to tell something to a specific genre. It's something that is able to be very much universal, that both, like, obviously Berserk is going to have a male skewed audience just by the nature of some of the subject matter, right? But it's something that I think anyone would agree, like, this is just something that you could consider on its own. It's just great literature, right?
I showed the 98 anime to the woman, and she loved it. She was really weirded out by the eclipse. She was like, what is happening now? What is this? And I was like, listen, this story goes places, but like, you ain't ready for that. You ain't ready for that.
This is the big moment. This is where everything changes. No, but yeah,
she was not happy with what happened to Griffiths. That he was like being mutilated. Griffith? She did not. Yeah, you know, when he was captured, like, and tortured for a year, she was not happy about it.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, how did she feel about it after the eclipse?
I am mixed emotions. We haven't really talked about it.
No, but like, again, I think that's something that I feel like, again, you know, clearly Miura had that on his mind in advance, and I think that it's something that is very much. It's very much smart of Shonen Jump to be like, okay, we've like maxed out on this side. Now we have to find a way where we can maintain this side while also expanding our way out to this completely other side of the demographic. And I think it's overall leading to stronger series where like whatever, like maybe you love your Narutos or your One Pieces or your thing, but it's like it's very obvious, or your Fairy Tales or like whatever, like, you know, you could name like a bunch of popular shonen from before this era. Like you could definitely be like, okay, a lot of these series, they're, you know, they're maybe great in their own right, but there's definitely points where you're like, okay, like Kishimoto cannot write women. Naruto is absolutely infamous for the fact that Kishimoto cannot write women for his series. I'm sorry. Like the man has done a, you know, I have been very critical of Naruto's writing, especially in the post Shippuden stuff, but like it is one of those things where like he's just not able to write compelling women without somehow stepping all over it at some point down the line. It's like this.
Can you give me an example of his writing women? What are we talking about here?
like for example, one of like a good example that explains like the beginning to the end of the series. Toward the beginning of the series, there's this character called Anko, and she's like portrayed as kind of like, you know, the badass, like kind of tomboy type character, where like, oh yeah, she's like very gritty. She's got like, you know, kind of like a history and stuff like that, and kind of a past, and she's kind of like a badass or whatever. By the end of the series, she becomes a gag character where the thing is like she got really fat. Like that's just it. That's just it. Like any nuance or interesting characterization or backstory or stuff, it was completely ignored, completely wasted. And by the end of it, Kishimoto's only thing he could think to do with her character for like his sequel series with like the children was to just turn her into just like a fat slob. And it's like, oh wow, isn't this kind of funny? Like she was this cool, real badass character, and now look at how she's turned out. It's like, no, like I like that character. I wish you did actually more with that character. Like, why? Right? And I'm talking about like a really small side character type thing that might have an outsized fan base.
This is a really weird question, maybe. But so there's a lot of guys who can't write women. Are there a lot of women who can't write for men?
I mean, I'm sure it goes both ways.
I don't have any examples, but I don't read a lot of. If a woman writes something, I refuse to read now. I guess I just don't read a lot of this.
The thing is, I'm someone who, like, my favorite genres are horror and romance, so I read a lot of shoujo. Like, I look at my shelves, like, I literally bought more shelving so I could put more shoujo on it for the future. So, like, I'm someone who reads a lot of both boy manga and girl manga, right? And I, you know, that's always been like my vibe in terms of what I've liked or whatever. So for me, generally speaking, there's usually, I don't see a lot where like they can't write usually men or women specifically. Usually it'll just be they can't write. And Kishimoto has some problems with his writing overall. The problem is that it becomes very obvious that a lot of his problems become where he doesn't give the women characters enough attention, or he has like a very limited dynamics on how he thinks he should or be able to write his women characters, and that kind of gets in his way from my perspective. But like, I have read lots of stories where like, okay, you have these characters where like the men are kind of mediocre, being written by female authors or writers or mangaka or what have you, but like usually I don't see where it's like, okay, it's not just the men. Usually the women also tend to have writing problems, though maybe it might be in a different way. Like maybe the men are kind of like really one note, but the female character is like, you know, a really like hyper competent girl boss or something like that. And then the problem is like, it's just kind of little bits where like, okay, you kind of created a Mary Sue type character and then created like a bunch of people who like only exist to basically be eye candy to surround her, and that could be its own type of problem, right? I can't recall any time where I'm like, oh no, everything is so like a woman character is written, like all her female characters, they're so amazing, they're so wonderful, and then the men, they're really sucky. Usually I feel like there's like enough problems spread around, so I'm sure it exists. I just haven't seen it where it's that lopsided yet, right? Like, and then again, to be fair, you don't always see that. You don't get a lot of Kishimoto's where you're just like, oh my god, what the hell are you doing with specifically your female characters here? Like, why is there such a disparity in attention and everything that you're giving with them in terms of story role, plot relevance, like all these things, like overall characterization or whatever. Like it's I think generally speaking, I think what the shonen series have been able to do is like, they're like, okay, we're gonna be shonen characters, but we're not gonna make it where like, okay, the male's gonna be like maybe the occasional lucky pervert, but that's gonna be the extent of the romance until maybe like the end of the series where they'll like time skip to like a marry off. Usually it'll be like, no, we should actually try to develop and focus on like the romance aspect, and maybe even make it like part of the central core of the story, so that way going forward, when you're like having the character go through their arc for the action side, they're also going through it for the romantic side. And I think that has overall worked really good. Like for example, with Blue Box, as I was mentioning earlier, that's like that's technically like a sports manga, or like it's about like high school and playing tennis and stuff like that. But what they do is like, unlike a lot of other series where like they get into the minutia of like the game and the players and all that stuff, Blue Box generally doesn't focus too much on that. Like sometimes it'll even skip over games and things like that. Like it'll like have like the action sets, but it's mostly like background and set dressing to shape around like it being a like romantic drama and things like that with some comedy mixed in. So I feel like stuff like that, it's like kind of like you're trying to make it where like you're doing like we've already done like the series where we go like all anal about the action side of things. Now we're going to try to also include a lot more of like the personal relationships and have that happening early on and developing that more. And I think that's worked for them a lot, though I haven't checked the hard numbers, so it could be like it's not being as effective as they hoped. So that's always a possibility.
I was going to say, the pervert is a character archetype that has basically completely disappeared in Western media.
For sure. for various reasons, for definitely.
For various reasons. But I'm thinking about like, yeah, no, they still have them in Japan. I'm thinking about like Sanji and One Piece.
Yeah, well, some of them are like Sanji is like a very much a legacy character, though. I do feel like for example, you don't see nosebleeds as often in more recent series. So like that's been a trend that I think is starting to go away. I think we're also fast approaching the point where like the walking in on the girls in the like while they're in the changing room or whatever. I think that's something that's also like that's been parodied in fact now to the point where I think you see parodies more often than them playing it straight anymore. And I think it's just another one of those things where it's like, okay, like this is like this gag has been like done to death. Like, we're not going to be doing this anymore. So I do think it's probably changing. Though I haven't watched too many ecchi recently. So, I mean, I haven't watched much of any anime recently because of all my stuff on Souls. So, like, it could be that there's, like, just new trends that I'm not yet familiar with happening. But, like, at least in terms of like, the manga side of things, I feel like a lot of that is kind of going by the wayside for more, like, generic, like, comedy gags and stuff like that. Or, like, if you're going to do the fan service, you're just going to, like, you're going to be shameless about it and just do the fan service, right?
Huh.
It's not going to be like, oh,
yeah,
the
lucky
pervert, she accidentally like fell right on top of his face with her ass.
I feel like that also used to be like maybe you have that sort of pervert moment in your show to like kind of entice viewers, and it's like, oh my god, what more do I watch? But it's like, anything that is made has like porn made of it 2 days later. So it's like, if I wanted to see this
now, right?
well, if I wanted to see this character, if I wanted to see her naked, I could just do that. I don't need to wait for you to put it in like the actual episode to try to like titillate me into sensation.
Well, one thing I'm noticing a lot more is I feel like more and more hentai artists end up in the position where they are getting hired to do either ecchi or even like non-ecchi. Like I know there's one series where I forgot what the title was, but basically like apparently the author did like a really popular hentai with these characters or whatever, and the author basically just serialized the manga where it's like, yes, it's canon to the hentai version, right? But none of it actually shows the hentai. It mainly just focuses on the character relation dynamics. And like I've read it and I'm like, yeah, you could definitely tell, because like they basically just be like, oh, they wink and nod and tell you, oh yeah, all the sexy stuff is still happening. It's just off screen between chapters and stuff like that, right? And like it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, that's a neat way to kind of do it, where it's like, okay, like, if you were someone who like, you built up your fan base drawing porn, and like now you're like, I need to make my money like doing something legit. Now you have something where it's like, okay, I can now like expand on like the characters. How do they feel? How's the relationship going? How does this work out? I'm like, I can actually appreciate that, right? Because like
that's an interesting career move.
No, exactly. And I think more and more that's happening. And I'm like, because there's another series where I'm like, oh my god, this is so like, god, there's so much sexual tension or whatever. I'm like, who is this artist or what? I look in there and I'm like, I see some like I forget if it was Reddit or something, but like when I did the Google search, I see the Reddit thing, and it's like, oh, this person does porn. I was like, oh, that explains so much. And that's when I first started noticing it. But
I saw there's a tweet I've seen where it's like, it's a panel from like some manga or something, right. or like it's just a drawing or something, and the caption is like, he's just talking about how like, when you can tell that your artist used to draw hentai, and if you really zoom in, it's like a guy holding a beer can, like the beer, like that's sort of drizzling down the can. It really clearly has like the the texture of sperm. It's like, oh, this is the only body fluid. This is the only fluid dynamics he knows how to draw.
There's I forgot what it was. There was
this guy's just drinking like spermy beer.
There's something where it came across my feed where apparently, I think it was something where like apparently some localizers are trying to censor the work, where they basically like the artwork gets redrawn entirely. So like this is the story of like it's one of those like it's one of those like smut for women type series, right? And like you got like the half naked guy and he's like sitting down with like his apron like half off, and then like you got like the female lead who's like holding this baguette, and I forget what the title was. It was something like, oh no, the baguette or something like that. And like the baguette clearly has butter that is drawn in very suggestive ways covering over it. And it just happens to be she's holding it right over in front of his crotch. And I'm like seeing all the comments about, oh my God, why are you censored? Like, what is the point of doing all this or whatever? Like, just do the uncensored version. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I thought this was just like, oh, they're doing a euphemism or something. Again, I'm like, oh, no. This is like, no, this is actual smut. And they're just like censoring what it is. I'm just like, why would you do that? Like, at that point, just be honest. Like, just come. Like, I get it. There's like, you know, especially on mobile and stuff, you have to have limitations. But like, there has to be a workaround that you're able to just like post that stuff. Because like, no, like you say, if someone wants the smut, they're gonna get the smut, right?
Yeah. There was a time in comic books, like superhero comic books, like 80s, 90s, 2000s, where a lot of the times the women would be posed with their faces doing like an O face. And you could like, you could identify the pornography it was traced after. And there was like one guy who was really known for this, where he would just like trace pornography in his comic books.
Does Miyazaki like Baycorn too? I'm sure Miyazaki likes all the Baycorn. But like that's another thing. Is like, are there ever franchises where you're like, God, I can't believe there's porn of this? Like, that's how I feel like with From Software titles. Like, I just like, I'm like
Yeah.
intellectually, I'm like, okay, sure, I understand it must exist because Rule 34. But like, it's one of those things where like, whenever like it's something where it's like, oh, I'm reminded of like, oh yeah, people draw porn of this. I'm like, huh? Like it's surreal to me.
Anything like mature, like Berserk or, you know, Monster, or just like the Souls games, like anything that you have had to engage with on an intellectual level for you to then go and like, I'm gonna jerk off to this. It's like, no, man, what are you doing?
Yeah, like I just cannot fathom that. Like
you don't bring Aristotle to the titty bar, bro. You just don't do that.
Yeah, like he'll go on his own. You just happen to meet there while you're both like.
But Logie, it's almost 4 a.m. where I am. I have to go out and fetch the cat.
All right, so we are going to probably close things down because we have had a extensive conversation, and I hope everybody is enjoying this one. I definitely do it. It's good when I'm able to just kind of sit down and chat with you.
The problem, Logie, is that whenever you and I sit down and chat, one of us is going to have a hard out, or else it's just a 7-hour conversation.
Very true. But you see, that's what all these people on stream like about it. They can just listen in the background on our 7-hour conversation. I see weird stuff with Gwendolyn and Nameless King, unfortunately. Oh my God. Like,
no!
Like stuff like that. I'm just like I cannot.
Your brothers! No!
That's the best part. No, but for me, like, I cannot. It's one of those things where, like, I just cannot imagine it with certain franchise or series because, like, yeah, that's just like not something where it's like, I can intellectually be like, I can accept that it can exist, but like, there's some series where you're like, okay, yeah, this is probably gonna have porn of it. Like, I can completely like, I just categorize it in a different way of being like, yeah, this is pornable, right? And it's something that's very.
Did you know?
It's very weird.
Did you know about when the Lorax movie came out? Did you know about Lorax porn?
No, I do.
Did you know the lore of it?
No, I do not, and that's another one I would categorize as not pornable. Please stop
well,
trying
so
to.
The thing is that the mechanics of that movie don't actually allow for a lot of pornography, because you just have like two characters basically. You have the Lorax and you have the Onslur. So what people started doing, the Tumblr people,
and that has very unfortunate.
There's like a little kid. There are more characters, but like. There's nobody for the Onslur to have sex with. So Tumblr fans, they started doing like shipping, and they started making alternate Onslurs. So they would be like cool guy cool Onslur and robot Onslur and like butler Onslur, and it's just like alternate versions of the character, and they would ship him together. I think, why didn't you just ship him with Danny DeVito's Lorax?
Well, I would say is why not just make your OCs at that point? Like, why the hell?
This is a bit of internet lore for you people.
Oh God, it's not what I needed.
But yeah, I gotta head out now.
All right, so we're gonna.
Thank you, everybody.
We're gonna end things
Thank you for
here.
having
Thanks
me.
so much, guys. Love you all. Peace.